Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thoughts. Now let's start the video. Sansa touched Theon's face as he tried to turn away, hiding his missing eye from that last awful struggle. They'd killed Ramsay even if it cost. Not that they'd expected to survive with an angry god making the very walls tremble as she cleansed the Boltons from life with their own blood. "What is it, Theon? You're safe now." His shoulders were the closest to unhunched they'd been since she'd seen him once more. "You've got Jon and that god, Winterfell. You want to go home." She should have expected that, and in a way she had. "You will be welcome in Winterfell if you choose to return." It was funny, a year ago she'd have wanted to claw his eyes out. "This is your home too. You helped me retake it. You protected me from him." At the end, Thasetin trembled, shaking his head while squeezing his remaining eyes shut. "No, I didn't. I let him hurt you." Sansa's hand dropped to his forearm. She just held on to him. It felt like her revulsion at the reminder of what they'd both suffered would choke her if she tried to speak. Instead, they just stood there, not looking at each other, consumed by grief and sorrow. Sansa finally broke it when she felt like it wouldn't strangle her to do so. "I hope you find what you need with your people. I need to go home." The sand shuffled. "It's where I'm supposed to be." She gave a sharp nod. "I'll send a party of 3 men to ensure you reach the coast safely." It was all she could do for him. After all, he was Ironborn and a traitor, no matter the regret he'd bled over his actions. "I don't deserve that." He looked at her then, but he quickly pulled her into a hug, his frame shaking ever so slightly. "If you have need of me, send word to Yara. Not that I'm good for anything." Sansa hugged him fiercely back. She pulled back at the change in sound from the courtyard, shouting, releasing Theon. She turned on her heel and opened the door, ignoring her tallies and work to ensure nothing of what was unloaded was wasted. "What's happened?" she demanded. Banners approaching from the south on the King's Road. Brienne looked like she'd half run to the door of the Solar at the news. Sansa's mouth thinned. Her next test had arrived then. "What sigil on the banners?" "The Merman," Brienne reported. Sansa took a deep breath. House Manderly, a house that had accepted Bolton rule, but also a house that owed everything to House Stark, and whose loyalty to her father had been absolute. Many of their own men and blood had died at the Red Wedding. They were Northmen, no matter their Andal blood. Sanjin Podrick and 5 men to guard wall to Bolton. "Then I want archers on the wall." "Should I send someone to fetch Daisy?" Brienne asked, her hand on the hilt of her sword. Sansa drew herself up. "No, this isn't her fight." She strode forward. She would meet her guests in the courtyard. Brienne would have returned to her side by the time she reached the courtyard. As she walked, she spotted Beor jogging towards her, face pale. She spoke quickly, "Bring bread and salt to the courtyard, and clear the center of it." "What if they attack?" he asked nervously. She lifted her skirt slightly. "Then it is a good thing we have the best archers in the north, and walls to stand on." Sansa stood strong and unwavering as Lord Manderly walked through the gates. 3 knights and a half-dozen men at arms accompanying him, the rest of his force waiting some distance back from the walls. He'd made no sign of attack, but he'd brought nearly 400 men armed and prepared for battle. The Lord of White Harbor was a huge man, too large for a horse. He'd stuffed himself into northern gear, though the garrote cut into him awkwardly, his thick wool gambeson tight and near to bursting. Somehow, he was smaller than he appeared in her memories from childhood. As he entered, he looked upon her with an unnamed emotion. He came to a halt before her, and then dropped to his knees. "My lady." Lord Wyman Manderly hadn't believed the letter bearing the grey waxen seal of House Stark. Its contents had been as unbelievable as the seal itself. But he'd known he had to handle it himself. His son would hold White Harbor, so he'd called for a wheelhouse, and as many men at arms as could be raised in a scant few days, and headed immediately for the road. He hadn't dared hope his plots and schemes would prove unneeded, that the Starks could return to power without war, that the traitorous and murderous cunts, the Boltons, were already dead. But as they'd approached Winterfell, and he'd seen the grey banners with wolves upon them, he felt something like hope and a flicker of joy. There were carts and small folk around the castle. As they approached, the small folk disappeared into the nearby town or into the castle itself. But there was no real fear or panic, mere caution to it. Why there were enough carts to have looted a fortress he didn't know. nor need to know immediately. The presence of archers on the wall and lack of welcome told him his reception would be uneasy, so he'd ordered his company to halt. He hadn't brought them here to fight, after all. Heaving himself out of his wheelhouse, he breathed in the cold northern air. He looked at his men, you 6 and you 3, with me, and then he walked towards the gates, his selected guard following him. As he walked, he noted the wagons. They were bothering him. Why were there so many wagons? There was no reason for it. If he kept his head, he would have to ask. The carts in the courtyard were piled high with barrels and furs and bags of grain. It looked like loot from a victorious battle, but while well-manned Winterfell did not appear to have the army for such a victory. But as he entered, his attention was riveted to the woman standing in the center of the courtyard. She may have the red hair and blue eyes of her Tully mother, but every inch of her bearing and manner was stark, her face cold and severe. Her gown of deep green with gray wolves upon the breast, and thick woolen cloak with fur tickling at her jaw, was as northern as it came. Sitting behind one shoulder was a giant white wolf, with nearly glowing red eyes. Standing behind her other shoulder was a knight. The courtyard parted before her, but full of men at arms, more blasted carts and various small folk, who'd clearly been in the process of unloading. His chest ached at the sight of the daughter of Eddard Stark, so cold and hard. Gods knew what she'd suffered, married to Ramsay Bolton, and before that at the hands of the Lannisters. He and the rest of the North, to their shame, had not moved to save her, and yet here she stood. The truth was so painfully clear. She was the Lady of Winterfell. She was victorious where all the rest stood, proven useless with their plotting and hatred, which left nothing but what was her due. He dropped to his knees. His men followed suit behind him. My lady, Lord Manderley. Her voice was cold as she stood before him. What brings you to Winterfell? Wyman bowed his head further. To throw myself upon your mercy and pledge my own and my house's fealty to you and House Stark once more. Yet you've brought a force of men to my door to do so. The courtyard was completely silent, as all within it listened. He didn't dare look up past the hem of her dress. Over 1,000 years ago, my ancestors made a promise, swore oaths in the wolf's den before the old gods and the new. When my house was alone and beset upon, in peril of death and extinction, the Starks took us in, protected us, gave us land and dignity, and in return we swore to always be loyal. Stark men to the bone. I have tried to serve your family, and I have failed. House Stark and you, then I will once more take your oath. Her words spoke of acceptance and possible forgiveness. Her voice did not. Wyman drew his sword, the old words falling easily from his lips. I pledge my loyalty to House Stark, to serve as your bannerman and come to your aid whenever called upon. Will you stand by me now and always? Lady Stark asked the traditional words. He replied with a deep sense of rightness. Now and always. And he meant it. Lady Stark waved forward a servant, who was holding bread and salt. Then you must join us for our feast tonight, to celebrate the destruction of the Dreadfort. His eyes widened as he finally looked up. Gods be good, she was serious. That's what the carts were. It answered one question, and raised 1,000 in its place. But it was not his place to ask, so he waved 2 of his men at arms forward, and they helped him rise to his feet. He reached out accepting the bread and salt, chewing it with relief and respect for his liege. My men and I encountered a small herd of elk during our march here. May I offer the meat to your tables for this fortuitous victory? The meat would be most welcome. Lady Stark looked at him evenly. We have much to discuss on the morrow, I believe. Of course, my lady. He gave her a bow of his head. I have much news of the North and my fellow lords that should prove useful to you. Wyman would tell her everything, and hope she believed him. Wyman had come to understand several important facts in the few hours he'd been in Winterfell. As the White Wolf had suggested, Jon Snow had come to his sister's aid. Though he did not seem to currently be in Winterfell personally, the servants, men, all of them trended towards unusually young and devotedly loyal. And equally odd was the woman of Yeti blood, who dressed in slightly ill-fitting men's garb that the men showed deep respect and almost reverence towards. And it wasn't just the men, he realized as he was offered a seat at the head table. The left seat, the right already offered to the foreign woman, Lord Manderley. Lady Sansa gestured to the open seat to her left. He wondered if it was an insult to fill the right-hand seat with the odd foreign woman, or if it was merely a matter of rank. It made him uneasy to not know what the status of Winterfell was. Though it was clear his forces were at least in part needed, he accepted the seat without complaint. Lady Stark, your cooks certainly seem to have done well. The men have been looking forward to tonight. She looked at the men-at-arms and common folk who had crowded into the great hall and around the tables. They have gone above the call of duty and loyalty in recent weeks. Wyman sipped from his cup. That is good to hear you have loyal men. It is. She took a bite of her meal, her court manners perfect and above approach. Her attention turned to the woman beside her. Sarai, I took the liberty of having one of the seamstresses prepare a modest wardrobe for you. I cannot apologize enough. It has taken so long to do so. You should not have been required to wear Rose's things for so long. The woman with the title of Sarah's face flickered with some surprise. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. But it'll be nice to be wearing something that didn't belong to a man I killed. Her lips twitched up. Wyman's eyes widened slightly. So that's what happened, at least in part. A foreign agent. Poison maybe in exchange for a place in the Stark household, perhaps. Certainly a likely possibility. Killing that man was a service to the North. I thank you for doing so when so many of us couldn't rid ourselves of the leech. Yes, I had heard your son was held prisoner at the Twins until recently. Sansa looked at him, her eyes sharp and intelligent. Wyman straightened slightly, his knuckles whitening as he spoke. And they forced me to betroth my granddaughters to those traitorous weasels. I'll be glad to have a raven to tell my eldest he can rid White Harbor of our Frey Watchers. Not that I was going to let my girls marry into that thrice-cursed family. That certainly must be a relief, to be free of any possible family ties with House Frey. One of Sansa's brows rose slightly as she looked at him. He gave a nod while taking a drink of wine. Right bastards, the lot of them. Wyman knew now wasn't the time to profess his plans for overthrowing the Boltons. She would speak to him in the morning. Your brother, Jon Snow. I thought he'd be here to support you, my lady. Jon Stark, Sansa corrected without hesitation. And he's taken an army to remove the Ironborn from House Glover's lands. Wyman calculated that in his head, the time given in the letter for the planned Lord's Moot, it was more than enough time for a man of military experience, and a small army to secure the northwestern coast. A bold move, it left her vulnerable here in Winterfell, but would give her a strong position to levy for the position of Warden of the North. But one detail confused him. Jon Stark, and who will contradict his name? He is the oldest surviving son of my father. Sansa sipped at her wine, though her gaze was challenging. He laughed outright. Good for her. Her time in the South hadn't taken the North out of the girl. Certainly not I. Wyman raised his cup towards her, toasting her damn balls. He washed down his humor. I brought the sensal as you requested, in your missive. I wish to see the truth of your victory, before preparing to bring more. I will of course rectify this immediately. Your sensal has taken ill on the road. Unfortunately, it may be a few weeks before he can take the position properly. Which of course the blasted man had to have gotten sick. The change in control of Winterfell was abrupt. Your caution is understandable. Sansa replied. Wyman accepted the words, though they left him cautious. He did not intend to be rude, however. Looked back to the foreign woman, he spoke. Tell me, how did the bastard die? The woman knight looked smug as she cut into her elk. I'm not the one who took care of that psychopath Ramsay. Wyman paused as he saw the expression on Sansa Stark's face. She looked like a wolf, satisfied from a meal well eaten. A hint of teeth showing as she continued to eat her diner. He outright chortled at that. Fucker deserved whatever you did to the cunt. Can't agree more. The woman looked at him. She was bright and less reserved than Lady Stark. The flaying thing, super gross. But hey, Lady Stark here's been whipping their old people into a workforce of her own. Wyman's gaze snapped back to the men in the hall. They were rowdy, but clearly pleased, and in high spirits. The age, the reason they were all so young, their loyalty to the Boltons would have been weakest. The few of an older age would be small folk from Wintertown. Sansa neatly took a bite of her meat. Most impressive, my lady. Wyman would have slapped her shoulder if she was a man. As it was, he just set his cup down firmly twice in a row. I'll send for some of my most experienced staff. But that's for business. Once more the woman on Sansa's right spoke up again. About your house. How did a mermaid come to be your sigil? Sansa's back rested against the door, her eyes closed as she pressed one hand against her chest and felt the moment of silence and privacy. She hadn't been alone or slept for 2 days now. But Winterfell was secure, and she could rest. For one night. Only she needed to speak with a god. If only briefly. She took a deep breath, straightened her gown, and stepped away from the door. There were questions she needed answered before she spoke with Lord Manderley on the morrow. Holding off his open curiosity during dinner had been exhausting. With that in mind, she picked up the latest raven from Jon and the Deepwood, and left her chambers. Sansa was in the Maester's hall when she saw Wolkan approaching her. "Maester, Lady Sansa." He dipped his head slightly as he reached her, causing her to halt. "I came to warn you about the man, Fitz." "What about him?" Sansa refused to show her unease. Quietly she prayed the man wasn't showing signs of harm. Wolkan looked shifty, his voice lowered. "He's God-touched, my lady." His mind cracked from it. "I can understand nothing of what he is doing, but I know that it is brilliant. Leagues beyond what any mortal should know." His mind jumps and hops instead of flowing. Her Holiness's concern for his behavior if she was not here was well-founded. "He is not right." "Is he dangerous?" Sansa asked carefully. Not that she could be rid of him if he was, but precautions must be taken. His fingers twitched nervously. "I don't know, likely if he wanted to, but he's half mad, and will certainly give much insult to any around him. The smith has poured too much into him, and now all the rest of us appear dim-witted, in comparison, and he is easily frustrated. See to it he is escorted, and his escort knows of his condition. I will not allow harm to come to him." Sansa had sworn to protect him, being addled by godly blessing, probably should have been expected of one claimed by one god already. Though Sansa had a feeling that Daisy was not the smith. Wolkan nodded with a relieved sigh. "That is wise, my lady.
Go see to it."
I need to speak to Her Holiness." She stilled as she noticed his aborted gesture, as if to hold her back. "Yes?" And though her voice was cold then, a shot of panic she would never show in the face of the gesture. "It's just Fitz is with Her Holiness at the moment, and Lord Manderley, is he aware of the nature of our other guests?" Sansa wished she could sigh. "No, but it is useless to imagine concealing that from him, though how we can prove it without requesting Her Holiness perform like a pet dog, I don't know. I'll give it some thought, till tomorrow, my lady." He gave a polite bow before leaving. Sansa gave herself a second to regain her composure completely. She couldn't risk showing the slightest crack around a god, and then she continued on her way through the halls. The rooms she'd assigned to the god were those reserved for the most important guests, the finest rooms outside of the Lord's chambers. When her father had been warden, it had been the rooms set aside for visiting lords. Perhaps it had been rude of her to not give up the Lord's chambers, but it had cut to think of, and so she'd been selfish. There'd been no complaint for which she was grateful. As she reached the door, she could see light spilling out from under the door. The faintest sound of voices. Sansa reached up and neatly rapped her knuckles against the ancient wood. A shiver ran down her spine, as the faintest of vibration in the air, as the door opened without visible cause. Looking in, she saw her two foreign guests sitting close together on top of the bed, papers spread out on the covers. Fitz's hands were splattered with ink, streaks of ink in his hair, likely from running his hands through it with inky hands. Daisy was looking up at her, a curious tilt to her head. "Lady Stark, I expected you to be asleep already. I wish to speak with you first." Sansa saw the open trunk, the new clothing she'd ordered made within. "The clothing is to your liking." Fitz's eyes flicked to the door, and then back to Daisy. "Since when can you do that?" Space was boring. Gemma and I were really bored, and there was nothing to do like 90% of the time. And there's no internet here, and it's been 2 months. Daisy shrugged as her eyes ticked back to Fitz. She waited till a sort of considering expression crossed Fitz's face. Then she slid to her feet with a sort of grace that was cat-like as she returned her attention to Sansa. "The clothing is beautiful, but I wanted to talk to you about it." Sansa carefully didn't take a step back as Daisy passed her on her way to the fire. She noted the kettle hanging over the fire. The god retrieved. "Would you have preferred a different cut?" "No. The pants and tunic combo is totes practical, and it's all gorgeous." Daisy took the lid off the clay pot on the small table. Sansa gave a slight nod at that. She was glad of the offer. It showed a lack of hostility, and an offer of peace. "Yes, thank you. Am I wrong to think the fact those tunic jackets, whatever the outer top clothing is, looking kinda like a weirwood tree, is purposeful?" She poured the water into the pot before setting it aside. Sansa took one of the seats by the table. You're not wrong. She'd been impressed by Grandia's work with the clothing. The fabric of the jerkins, tunics, and jackets were all made out of different shades of gray and silvers. The thread was white and silver, embroidering twining across the fabric, red weirwood leaves stitched across it. The old gods brought you here, and clearly the woman was some sort of god, whether that was one of the old gods or not. Sansa was unsure. I can hear your weirwood trees. Daisy took the seat across from her. The air, the roots and leaves, and just all of them are vibrating at a different frequency than anything I've ever felt before. I don't know what they are, but if your old gods are real, dressing up like one might be a really shitty idea. I'm not one of your old gods. Sansa wasn't sure what to say to that. She was saved by Fitz snorting from the bed. He looked over at Daisy. It was like he barely registered that Sansa was there. You're a demigod at least. What? Like Hercules? Daisy scoffed. Laughter in her voice. Should I find a Greek choir? Maybe find a toga? Fitz's fingers twitched. You're an Ivan human, he waved a hand. Ancient race of human hybrids. What's a demigod but a chi-child of a god, and a human? And humans are Kree and human monsters bred and designed for war. Name a better option for where the Greek stories of humans with supernatural abilities came from. But the Kree aren't gods. Daisy frowned. Fitz groaned. What even is a god? Are the Asgardians gods? You were made to kill them. And what can kill a god but a god? Not to mention, apparently you got dosed with the centipede serum. There's a certain level of logic to it. Demigod goes through trials and tribulations, ends the line of the evil gods that created you, in a final act of sacrifice. In battle, your father figure gives you a golden elixir that took you from powerful enough to level cities, to being able to destroy whole worlds. His arms moved as he spoke. At this point, you're as much a god as anyone or anything is. You're probably actually immortal, and now, considering the serum. That's ridiculous. But as Daisy trailed off, the weight of his words felt more real. Sansa barely dared breathe. If a fraction of what she understood was true, the implications were terrifying. Not that she knew what several of the words he used meant, but the context made the meaning clear enough for Sansa to understand that if true, the woman before her was horrifically dangerous. Not that she'd ever doubted it. Okay, but that aside, pissing off the magic trees is probably a shitty idea. Daisy crossed her arms, looking at Fitz. Inhuman, or demigod, or actual god, or whatever I am from a, I guess, philosophical point of view. I'm still not a fan of the idea of making ancient magical things mad at me. Fitz pressed a hand against his forehead. You're missing the point. We should have died. Which time? Daisy scoffed. He stared at her, unamused, the smile sliding off Daisy's face. The Chronicom's portal wasn't set. There wasn't a destination. We should have ended up lost in a space between the fabric of reality. But we ended up in a tree. Wait, you're suggesting the magic tree summoned us? 'Cause that's what it sounds like you're saying. Daisy was visibly baffled. Fitz rolled his eyes. This is why I hate magic. But how'd we survive the tree? You can't have matter in T2 places. If the portal was how we ended up in the tree, we'd be dead. He brought his hands together, threading his fingers together. Matter can't exist where other matter already is. Daisy hissed, moving to her feet. That's some bullshit. Her lips pressed together, and she made an angry humming sound. Fuck. Wyman Manderley was barely holding his tongue as he entered the Great Hall to break his fast. It'd been masterfully done, but that Lady Knight, or possible assassin, the one given the seat of honor, had neatly aided Lady Stark from answering questions at dinner. His eyes landed on Lady Stark, already at the head table, a book open before her as she broke her own fast. He smiled as he approached. Lady Stark, Lord Manderley. She looked up as he approached and took his seat from the night before. Her eyes flicked to the book in front of her. I was just reading about the construction of glass houses. He chuckled as he sat. A bowl of porridge filled with nuts and fruits was set in front of him. Are you thinking of building more, my lady? Yes. We have had a long summer, and it's ending. Anyone with eyes can see that. A summer this long will be followed by a long winter. One we are ill prepared for. Lady Stark turned a page in her book. Wyman noted the book of ledgers, with exacting handwriting in it. It was a sign the girl had a good head on her shoulders. War will come from the south once word reaches them. The Boltons have fallen. Winter or no winter. A Southern army invading through the neck in winter. Lady Stark stared at him like he was a fool. They have no navy large enough to threaten us, and so long as we hold the moat, only a fool would stage a land invasion of the North in winter. The Hand will be forced to offer us terms to prevent that, whether Queen Cersei approves or not. If it requires that I kneel for a season, then I will do it to give our people time to regain our strength. His brow rose as he stared at the woman before him. You would consent to the rule of the bastard Tommen. I am willing to do what is necessary to protect the North. My brother lost it, and his losses and the Boltons have ruined us. Just preparing for winter will nearly beggar us, but it must be done, or we will freeze in our castles while the small folk freeze in their huts. There was a cold fury in her tone, a steel spine. Wyman chewed on his morning meal as he considered that I will be honored to help facilitate trade with Essos, and of course my men are your men. But we have enough men in the will to fight to prevent the Southerners from ever taking the North. I would agree with you, except we have more to contend with than a normal winter. She faced him fully. Her face was in that moment. Ned's in the face of his duty. It forced Wyman to straighten his spine as he faced her. As she spoke, it was with a certainty that was rooted deep. Magic is returning. We all know that. Reports of magics, dragons in the east, shadow demons in the south. But the old gods are waking too. The long night is here. He paled. There could be no question, she meant it, and even in White Harbor he'd heard dark rumors of maggots across the narrow sea. Not to mention in the war, everyone knew the tale of the Shadow Demon. Said to have killed Renly Baratheon, but those were stories. What proof do you have? My brother fought them. He killed another. The Night's Watch is on the brink of collapse. He let the wildlings through the gates, and they will fight with us against the dead. There was no doubt in her face, and no lie there either. And the old gods have moved. I may have stabbed Ramsay, but the fall of House Bolton took an hour. The men who did not kneel and repent died where they stood. The dread fort is rubble. The earth itself opened and swallowed its halls. I'm not entirely sure what her true name is, but she's given the name Daisy Johnson. He knew that name. The woman from the feast. You can't mean, she came out of the face tree. Sansa's skin paled ever so slightly. You are free to see the damage, but she came from the tree. Her power is unquestionable, and she is dangerous. I understand it is difficult to believe, but it's the truth. Manderley opened his mouth to reply, but then stopped as the subject of their conversation entered the hall, and she wasn't wearing the clothing of a dead man. Instead, she looked like a weirwood, the fabric deceptively like bark, the embroidered leaves bright in the morning light. It was instinctively wrong to see a person so clearly not of the North wearing the colors and symbols of their gods. But the response of the servants and men-at-arms ambling through the hall was telling. Not an eye was raised towards the woman and her garb. In fact, the people showed a quiet reverence, moving out of the way without question or thought. It had been the same last night now that he thought of it. There'd been no unhappy murmurings or looks at her place of honor at the table, and now as she returned to it, there was not a single man who appeared to see it as anything but hers by right. Lady Stark, Lord Manderley. Daisy raised a hand in greeting as she sat. She focused on Lady Stark. You and Fitz were right. She accepted her bowl from one of the servants. The tree wasn't unhappy about the clothing, which that's a weird sentence I never expected to be saying. Lady Stark replied, like that was normal. Though considering the giant direwolf sleeping by the great fire, perhaps Starks were just better at dangerous creatures. Then you've decided. I'll do it. However, I have a feeling I won't get much done this morning. I think one of the washerwomen got me to agree to watch like a whole herd of small children. Honestly, it was kind of impressive. The woman looked fairly confused at how she'd ended up in this position as she took a bite of her meal. Wyman swallowed his scoff at the thought. This was a god, but he held his tongue, though he intended to have answers and proof. Your companion will continue his work in the Maester's halls, then? Lady Stark asked. Daisy the would-be god shrugged slightly. Probably, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes poking around your smithy. I hope he finds it to his satisfaction. Lady Stark flipped several pages in her ledger before giving a pleased nod. The smith survived the initial purge and has 4 apprentices. Daisy winced slightly. I'll accompany him if he does. He can be a bit. She trailed off as her eyes snapped to the entrance of the hall. Fitz, and sure enough, Before Wyman could comment on the fact, no one was coming into the hall other than a servant carrying one of the benches from last night out. A curly-haired and clean-shaven man came jogging in. There was a nervous, fluttery energy to him as he moved, eyes locked on Daisy as soon as he entered. "I figured it out. Sorry." Daisy shot a look at both of them, before returning her attention to the agitated man. "Figured out what?" One of his hands ran through his hair as he slapped a sheet of paper down on the table. "I was wasting my time trying to establish whether this world is flat or round. The time and scope of trying to discover that simple fact would take me days. But then it occurred to me, you can just check. You want me to try and feel the entire realm? That's insane." Daisy was looking at her, whatever the man was to her. "Thoughts," scoffed, "that we know of. Your abilities have grown. But no, you can just go up and check." He pointed upwards at the ceiling. Daisy opened her mouth and then winced. "That's going to suck. It's fucking freezing that high up. You won't be up there long." Fitz waved off, his gaze not moving from her. Daisy lowered her spoon. "You're going to get weird if I don't go check right now, aren't you? We need to know these basic things before I can even think of building a beacon home." He was looking at her with pure judgment, and Daisy sighed, seemingly unaware of how tense Lady Stark had gotten at the way the man spoke to her. Instead, the woman turned to Lady Stark. "Sorry, it would seem I need to go attempt to fly very high and get very cold and wet." She stood as she spoke. Lady Stark considered the woman for a moment. "I believe Lord Manderley and I would join you to witness this. I find myself curious about what exactly it is you are checking for." Lord Manderley had been fascinated at the curly-haired man, Fitz's, rambling as they walked towards the courtyard. The man was addled, but Wyman knew enough of the sea to at least grasp the possibilities of what he was suggesting. Though the concept that the woman before him could fly that high was ridiculous. But he followed regardless. As they reached the courtyard, Daisy easily stripped her outer tunic off, leaving herself in just a fine white shirt from the waist up. She clapped her hands together. "Right, step back." Lady Stark did as requested. "May you find what you wish to." Fingers crossed, Daisy grinned, and then dropped to a crouch, her hands open, palms towards the ground. Wyman felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as the entire courtyard fell silent. He could almost swear he saw the air beneath her hands waver. The ground beneath her cracked, denting downwards a solid inch in a perfect circle around her. And then she was gone in a burst of power that buffeted outwards as she flew upwards fast as an arrow. His head snapped backwards as he tracked her course as she vanished above the clouds. "My God!" Sansa noted that Fitz had taken several large steps backwards and immediately followed suit. She could tell he was waiting for the god's return. How he was alive considering how he spoke to said god, she didn't know. But it was horribly clear he was far closer to her than a simple friend or dear companion. Lovers they may not be, but that hardly mattered if her regard was enough for her to ignore his tone, and requests phrased like orders, and distance clearly wouldn't be an option for safety from the god if the worst came. If she could damn well fly. Not that she hadn't been aware, but seeing was different than merely knowing. How long will she be up there? Not long, Fitz frowned, using one hand to shield his eyes. It was more of a jump, she'll come down once she's reached the eyes. It was more of a jump, she'll come down once she's reached the zenith of it. He didn't even properly acknowledge he was speaking to her, his focus still riveted upwards. Sansa raised a brow. He could certainly never be allowed anywhere without an escort till the servants and men were accustomed to his manner. If he failed in manners towards her, he was likely worse towards the staff. That level of rudeness would get him killed. She didn't reply, however, as a hurtling dark shape fell through the clouds. The figure was hurtling towards the ground head first, arms and legs tightly pressed together as she streaked downwards like an arrow. Terror felt like it was choking her. No one could survive that. Then Daisy tucked and rolled in the air, feet over her head till she was coming down feet first, her arms held out and down. There was a great burst of, perhaps wind, but it felt more like pure pressure slamming into the ground, followed by Daisy, who landed on her feet, her descent slowing from inhumanly fast to merely foolishly fast. She wobbled slightly and then tipped over onto her ass. Daisy was breathless as she sat on the ground, face wide as she laughed. I take it back, that was awesome. She was soaked to the bone, but excitement practically radiated from her. Bloody ops agents, Fitz grumbled as he jogged over, holding out his hand. Well, she laughed again as she accepted his hand. He easily pulled her to her feet. as she replied to him. Round, we're on a planet. Get a cloak. Sansa ordered a man as she realized Daisy was shivering. Daisy grinned. I've got it, don't worry. Her eyes closed, her brow furrowing in concentration, and then steam rose from her clothing and hair all at once. Her eyes snapped open. That said, I'm going to go change. That felt soups weird. How fast did you just manipulate the vibrations in the water? Fitz's eyes widened as he reached out, catching the fabric of her shirt's sleeve, clearly feeling the temperature of it. And then the strangest thing happened. Daisy gently brushed his hand off, but that wasn't what Sansa noticed. However, it was a barely noticeable stiffening of her muscles under the fabric. If she hadn't been down to breeches, boots, and a thin shirt, Sansa would never have noticed. Sansa also wouldn't have noticed without years of watching her captors for the slightest change. The reaction indicated disquiet, unease at the contact with a man who every other sign implied was as close as blood to the god. Our heating system went out when we were looking for you. Daisy replied with a sort of mild exasperation. I said we got bored. Fitz blinked. The applications, if you've mastered that degree of fine control. His head tilted slightly, brows furrowing before he nodded. That will help. We need to establish now if we're in the same reality as Hetsia home. Sansa politely waited for Lord Manderley to finish drinking his wine. The man needed it. It wasn't every day a person witnessed and accepted the presence of gods. Are you prepared to assist in guarding the north from the long night? Yes. Yes, of course. The man was pale as he set his wine goblet down. If you forgive me, my lady, how do you intend to secure the north? I will of course assist. He was pained as he looked at her. She stared at the man she did not trust. Not that she trusted any but Jon, and even then it was a trust that he would not harm her, intentionally. Not that she could trust his actions. There was a measure of trust she felt in her sworn sword. The Lady Brienne, the honorable woman, was too like Sansa's father, for her to ever fear hidden blades from there. But it was a short list of those she trusted in any form. Securing the north is not what I require your assistance with. How so? I mean no disrespect, but I and those in my confidence had meant to find your brother Rickon and place him in Winterfell and rid ourselves of the Boltons that way. Wyman's shoulders slumped as he refilled his cup. It shames me to admit it, but we'd thought you lost long ago, my lady. Sansa felt the burn of that. She'd long since known that, for all the loyalty the men owed her as a Stark had long since been spent. Her rescue had become incidental. Long before Robb had died, the Battle of the Blackwater had been her last true hope of rescue. I am Sansa Stark of Winterfell, and this is my home. She stared at him, daring him to refute her. I have never forgotten who I am, even if it seems my people have. To our shame, my lady, Wyman bowed his head, real or convincing enough. Shame portrayed in his actions. We failed you. We failed your family. But you have my word, by the old gods and the new. I will not fail you again. He set a leather-wrapped package of letters on the desk. This is all I have as proof I never was loyal to the Boltons. What evidence there is of our plans to restore a Stark to Winterfell. She opened the leather package. There were dozens of letters inside. It made a great deal of sense. The North would seek to restore a Stark. The bannermen of the North were loyal. More so than those of the South, and they'd suffered the loss of their own sons and men at the hands of the Boltons and Freys, violating guest rights. It made sense. She didn't need to read these missives to be inclined to believe him. Tell me, what did you have intended for me in these grand conspiracies of yours? We thought you a lost cause once the bastard had you. If you survived a marriage to a loyal man to care for you and provide what comfort could be given and as safe a life as we could manage. He didn't add the likely use of politically rewarding whatever house this loyal man came from. She gave a barely there nod at that. You meant to make Rickon the warden. Do you know where he is, then? Her heart beat in her chest, with painful longing at the thought of her brother alive, and not merely lost, possibly alive, possibly dead. I've had word he was on Skagos. Wyman replied without hesitation. Morzumber went to find and fetch the boy if possible. He was to hide him at Last Hearth till we had an opportunity to attack. Sansa breathed in at that. She would not let the flicker of hope grow. Then we can hope they have good news when I return. Lord Umber to them. Greyjohn? Wyman's eyes widened. The Freys have him. She looked at the Lord. Not any longer. My men should be returning with him any day now. That will go far in securing the North under your rule, my lady. But if I may, that alone will not be enough. not with winter so close. Sansa knew her position. House Manderley was needed, for their harbor, their ships, their army, and their reputation, if she meant to succeed. Then it is a good thing my brother has an army, is removing the last of the Ironborn, and with that acquiring Lawrence Snow. Not to mention I have the men preparing a gift of gratitude to House Severin for what they suffered under the Boltons for their loyalty to my family. 100 head of cattle, 50 head of horse, 50 bags of grain, and 10,000 gold dragons. Once my brother returns, those houses that willingly betrayed House Stark will be reminded of why we have ruled the North for 8,000 years. You mean to legitimize Lawrence as the last issue of the late Lord Hornwood? House Umber, Serwyn, Manderley, Glover, Hornwood, likely Mormont if you sent your brother north. That would be a strong power block, my lady. He frowned, rapping his fingers on the table, clearly reading the implied insult and no offers of gifts. Only a lack of punishment for House Manderley. You mean to attack the Cristarks, Dustins, and Ricewells then? Sansa knew she was cold as she replied to that. The Cristarks are Ken, and turned against us, despite it. Took part in the killing at the Twins. Their house will be turned to dust. I won't have their names survive. Like the Greystarks and the Frosts before them, they will cease to exist. Lord Manderley shivered slightly. The Destins and Ricewells share ties of blood and marriage with House Bolton, and their names will survive for that reason, though I will exact a price upon them for betrayal all the same. And she would. The North would never follow a leader who forgave treason without penalty and kinslaying without vengeance. Just as loyalty must be rewarded, so must disloyalty be punished. He bowed to her words without question. I will send word to my son. What is your trade proposal for Essos? Then my lady. Sansa ran her fingers through Ghost's thick fur as she sat by the fire. She felt steadier like that, especially with something as dangerous as Daisy in the room with her. So you've decided on a religious order then? I was thinking about that. Daisy certainly looked her part as she stood in her new garb. What would you say to an order of knights? I can ensure their loyalty is to the old gods, and the Starks who still hold to those gods. Sansa pondered that. She knew as well as anyone that meant little, but it left a leash she could seize, once this god left. If you believe that is for the best. I do. Daisy handed her a small stack of papers. My proposal of what such an order would encompass. I'd have to figure out a moral code. Nothing hard to follow, but simple enough, it shouldn't be twisted out of context with time. Sansa felt the familiar dry tongue and confused concern at this action. This god owed her nothing, no request for permission. None of it. I would appreciate that greatly. Good, I'll see to it. Daisy sighed, and handed over another list. In the meantime, this is what Fitz needs for his tools. She stared at the materials and raised a brow at it. It'd be expensive, in some cases difficult to acquire everything, but certainly not impossible. It will take time. I understand. Daisy paused. She frowned. I'm sorry for him. He won't take it well. But he'll understand even if he doesn't like it. Sansa was brimming with questions about the discrepancies there, but instead she asked something softer. How long has his mind been fractured? Daisy flinched, looking away. It was my fault. Her voice had a bitter edge to it. That first time, it was my fault. But now, so many terrible things happened, and Fitz, he needs to heal, but without Gemma. I promise he's a good guy, a kind one who is brave and caring. He's just broken right now. I offered you both my shelter and protection, so long as you were here. He has that. The men understand that he has seen too much. Sansa had met plenty of brilliant men who were said to be touched by a god, genius, perhaps even a gift, but she felt they'd misused the term, having met one who truly was God. Touched. There was a madness there that equaled the greatness. A curse nearly as much a gift. Daisy gave her a brief, grateful look as she stood. I'll be on my way then. But thank you for everything. Which left Sansa feeling left-footed once more. What sort of god thanked a mortal for mere room and board? It is nothing. Daisy slapped Hogg's back. I've been looking for you, Hogg. You have. His voice cracked as he stared at her with wide eyes. She beamed. Poor kid had to get used to her eventually. And at least his fear hadn't turned to distrust and cagginess like so many S.H.I.E.L.D. agents had. I have a project you can assist me with. Anything, Your Holiness. He practically glowed, his spine straightening, chest puffing up. She was grateful she'd been reading and asking questions her entire time here. I refuse to leave a legacy of people forming something awful, like the Faith Militant, in my name. Which that book had been disturbing. Horrible times. So proactively making sure nobody goes around murdering people in my name. You need to talk to Wilbur Thatcher. Hogg nearly bounced. He's got learning, yo. He can read and write. Daisy felt a sort of resigned misery at that. She was creating a damn religious order. Mac was never going to let her hear the end of this. So where can we find Thatcher? She was never going to be able to keep a straight face talking to someone and calling them Wilbur. Poor fucker. It was almost as bad as Poots. Daisy folded her legs under her as she sat on a barrel in the storeroom. Hogg sitting on a pile of bags of grain. Thatcher having set his accounting work aside and writing as they spoke. She cleared her throat. Right. So I've never been good at the whole dealing with hero worship thing. I mean, the shrines of me thing always was kinda weird. So no graven images of you? Thatcher asked, holding his quill above the sheet of paper. She shrugged. Not like punishable if you do, but preferred for the not thing. So, a symbol people can use instead? Hogg asked, eager to help. Daisy nodded. That'd work. What about that leaf and direwolf symbol you made, Hogg? That's... Hogg trailed off, looking uncomfortable. She sighed. I'll take that as it won't work. Daisy bit at her lower lip. Could we use the leaf with a direwolf on it as a symbol for anyone who follows me? A different symbol can be used for me personally. You want to dedicate your holy order to the Starks? Thatcher stared at her in confusion. But you're a god. Daisy turned a coin around in her fingers. I won't be here for forever. I intend to leave once Fitz makes a portal or beacon or something. She saw their confusion. A door between worlds. And yup, there was the usual reaction to realizing what the hell Fitz was doing. All in horror. Once I'm gone, any order I've left behind should follow Lady Stark once I've left. You wish to leave your followers in the service of Lady Sansa Stark when you leave? Thatcher's eyes were wide. She didn't quite understand what the big deal was. Sexism probably. Yes, I'll see to it. He scratched his quill across the paper. Hogg spoke up, his voice slightly squeaky. What do you like for your personal sigil or symbol? Daisy paused, considering it. It wasn't exactly a thing she'd thought she'd ever have to do. But then she was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. Pass the paper. I'll draw it. Thatcher passed his notes, quickly ensuring there was a fresh sheet up on top of the portable desk. It was a bit like a wooden lap desk, really. She'd had a blue one for her laptop, back on the Zephyr. You'll want to make a nicer version of it. Drawing isn't really one of my skills. Her cheeks heated slightly at that. Failing art class for drawing dicks on the desk hadn't been 15-year-old. Her greatest moment. With careful scratching with the quill, she sketched out the eagle of S.H.I.E.L.D. Fortunately, their logo was a fairly geometric version of an eagle, and it was on fucking everything, so it wasn't like she couldn't draw the thing in her sleep. She knew she needed more than that, though, if she meant to create a religion, which... so weird. So she carefully did her best to sketch a leaf on the eagle's chest. Setting the quill down, she passed the desk back to Thatcher. He looked at it, and then passed to Hogg. You've got some skill with charcoal. I can do something with this. Hogg looked at her. What bird is this? Daisy refused to flinch, no matter how much she hated being lost from her team again. An eagle, she considered it. It would probably help. I was called Sky for years, and I lived in the sky. Of course, Your Holiness. Hogg bowed his head, awe in his voice. I'll bring you my best work. She smiled at the poor kid. Good. In the meantime, the direwolf and leaf one, can that be made into brooches for anyone who wishes to follow whatever order I end up with? I'll speak with the blacksmith. Hogg agreed. Thatcher spoke up. That is, our order would need to know what your commandments, your moral code is. Fuck. Daisy brushed her hair out of her face. Right. Not my thing. I don't care about petty things or dumb rules. Thatcher gave a nod. When is it acceptable to kill? Self-defense. In defense of others. Daisy knew she was in a medieval hellscape, and Hydra had proved sometimes death was the only way. If found guilty of a crime warranting execution, the quill slid quickly over the paper as he wrote, Sex. As long as both parties want it and you know, adults, I don't care. Daisy was firm on that. Years of Catholic orphanage had ensured she wasn't even touching sexual rules. That shit was dumb, pointless, and hurt people. Hogg's face scrunched up. Even if one of the people is already married. You mean adultery? Daisy sighed. Look, adultery is crappy and sucks. But in the same way muddy roads are crappy, not great, and there are definitely social consequences, but I don't care. It's just normal, regular, crappy, not a violation against humanity. Oh no, yeah, I definitely do not care about virginity. That's a dumb thing to expect of someone. It doesn't hurt anyone either way. It's a stupid social concept, and really unfair to judge women and men differently on the whole thing. How much sex you have has nothing to do with your character or morality or whatever. Stealing is bad, but like there's some nuisance there. Like if someone steals an apple because they're hungry, that's way different than someone who steals to make themselves rich. Also, who are they stealing from? It's about harm done, not specifically the act itself. Daisy groaned. Again, harm done. You have to fairly judge the person based on what harm they've done. Did they hurt other people? Did they mean to hurt other people? How badly did they hurt other people? And reparations for harm done are important. The whole do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which Daisy paused. Wait a minute. She was creating a religion. She could just straight up rip off the nice parts of different earth religions. The love others stuff. The whole Buddhist thing of training yourself to do good. Actually, she liked the idea of the whole putting morals into action requiring intelligence and sensitivity thing was kinda awesome. Hippie God it was. She had this. Jon rode high in the saddle as he and his men came up over the hill. He frowned, looking down at the encampment down by the beach. Tormund, we can take the fuckers. Tormund's face was flush with excitement as he unslung his axe. Man was clearly living to eradicate the last pockets of Ironborn, now that the Deepwood motto was once more in Glover hands. A week of chasing Ironborn stragglers throughout the country was clearly the most fun the free folk had had since they'd crossed the wall. Jon drew his sword. We'll need to be fast. Jon barely got his sword up in time to block the swing of his opponent's axe. Bracing his arms, he kicked the Ironborn in the gut, sending the man backwards, nearly bent in half. His sword whistled through the air as he brought down in a powerful arch, slicing the Ironborn's head clean off. He turned, sword raising, prepared to defend himself against the next foe, only to find that had been the last of them. Got your blood up. That did. Tormund roared as slapped Jon on the shoulder. The forcing nearly knocked him over. Jon's lips twitched up, but he fell serious as he looked at the remains of the Ironborn shore camp. Take what supplies you want. We burn the bodies with the rest. One of the free folk let up a cheer as they located a barrel of ale. Jon felt a flicker of warmth as he saw the men inspecting the meat on the spit over the fire, happily testing the edges of the now dead Ironborn's weapons. He was making a difference here. The coast was nearly free of the last dregs of the Ironborn. What's got you all moony? Tormund stared at him in suspicion and mild consternation. We fought, we won, there's food and drink. What more do you want? He wiped his sword clean before sheathing it. We should turn for Winterfell soon. You southern cunts. Tormund made a sound of disgust and marched off to claim his portion of the ale. Jon chuckled low in his throat as he followed behind Tormund. It would be good to be home again. Fitz angrily slapped plaster on the walls of the room he'd been given near the stables and smithy. It fit the requirements he'd had for a lab space, and if he was generous, being near the smithy was probably good. But for fuck's sake, how was he meant to do anything in these conditions? Maybe glare at the walls a bit more and they'll combust? Daisy teased as she stepped into the room. She looked around. This is pretty neat. He stared at her in disbelief. It smells like meat in Nor. There's a stable like 20 feet that way. She jerked her thumb towards the far wall. And it's the Middle Ages. There's horses everywhere. Fitz stuck his brush into the large pail of plaster before lifting it and slapping it onto the wall again. Here to help? Duh. Just had to make sure I didn't accidentally create like a murder cult or something. Her nose wrinkled as she grabbed a brush and approached the plaster pail. I grumbled as he continued his own work. I don't know how you can stand this place. Well, I'd kill for a cup of coffee and a laptop. Daisy's brush hit the wall with a sort of wet plop, and the flaying people alive thing was deeply disturbing. But it's not the worst. Fitz stared at her. What could be worse than this primitive hellhole? The framework, Kree slave colony on an asteroid. Florida. Daisy raised an eyebrow, and Gemma was on a desert wasteland in eternal twilight, with an evil squid monster, when she got trapped on another world. His shoulders slumped. Fair. I mean, she had to go full Rambo to survive. Daisy teased gently as she worked. Very hot, but very unexpected. Fitz groaned. We're cursed. It's like the universe itself won't let us be tea together. That's crap. Daisy set her fist down on her hip and looked at him. After everything, you two still have each other, still love each other more than anyone I've ever seen. And I'm a god now. Apparently, so I declare you uncursed. I didn't spend a year trapped in the Zephyr hunting you across the universe for Gemma, just to watch you give up because your new lab smells a bit like horse manure. Something dark in his chest, untwisted ever so slightly, the ugliness sinking slightly in the face of the unwavering belief he was faced with. I might be despairing to you prematurely. Ya think? Daisy slapped his shoulder. Besides, you know Gemma and Enoch will totally be trying to find us on their end. She frowned slightly. Why are we painting your new lab with lumpy white paint?
Fitz rolled his eyes. It's plot plaster, it'll reflect the light a bitter.
Huh, neat. Daisy dunked her brush back in the mixture. He felt a deep well of exhaustion as he worked. I'm gonna have to invent electricity. The scope of what he needed to make just to attempt to ascertain where they were was massive. We're going to bide about here for a while. Well, there's some magic ice zombies I have to kill to pay for all your lab stuff. Daisy slapped her brush back against the wall. And I'm apparently making a holy order of knights, sworn to me. But years of mean nuns and Sunday school paid off. Fitz had a terrible feeling. Died Daisy. What did you die to? Created a hippie-free love religion all about compassion and understanding, by ripping off the love bits from the Bible and Buddhism. Daisy grinned at him. He spluttered. That's plagiarism. We're on a different planet, where they don't have running water. I think I'm good. Daisy was irritatingly smug at that. Fitz gaped at her. They hack people with swords, and stone people. No one we will believe. A word of that. Also, human sacrifices are a thing here. Daisy looked disturbed. Do you want to wake up to a human heart offered up on a plate for my dark godly powers? 'Cause I don't. So, they can work out loving thy fucking neighbor. She shrugged. Besides, idiots keep trying to stab me every time I go to a new place here and I've just been freezing them solid. Nobody's gonna question that. He groaned, his hand slapping over his eyes. This is going to blow up in our faces. Probably everything we do blows up in our faces. Daisy patted him on the shoulder. It didn't help. But nice castle, with fireplaces. Chin up, we're not in the frozen woods, with the ice zombies. Could be worse. Fitz really wanted to bang his head against the wall. They were painting. It'd make him feel better. He had a sudden bolt of inspiration. You need titles. Quick. The fuck? Fitz snorted into his mug of ale at Daisy's horrified expression. Technically you're a princess. Dying was an elder, not a queen. Daisy stared at him, clearly ready to crawl out of her own skin at the concept of being a princess. He shrugged. So, daughter of the Fett, first elder of our afterlife. Horrifying, but probably correct. I'll add it. She scribbled the title to the list. I can never use, any of these. But they are better than Destroyer of Worlds. So maybe not. Fitz's lips twitched. She looked a bit like Sky had in the bus, curled slightly, hair falling around her shoulders in the dim lighting. It was nostalgic, really. Don't forget Sky, or whatever your hacker handle is. I still think referring to myself as a daughter of blood is the alcohol talking. Daisy pouted. I mean, daughter of a psychotic serial killer. Father doesn't sound great, but really, we're redoing this when you're sober. Why can't you have dumb titles? He snorted outright at that. I'm not the god. It was warm sitting like this. Felt a bit like old times, really. Wyman watched from his window as a large party left out the front gates of Winterfell. The whole castle was abuzz with activity. It was frankly impressive how quickly Lady Stark had taken a bunch of untrained boys and small folk and turned them into a working force. He lifted a sealed letter and placed it in his knight's hand. Sir Flint, take this and ride to your father and give it to him. You are to stop at every inn, tavern, and keep between here and there, and spread the word. Lady Stark has ended the Boltons, and a Stark once more rules in Winterfell. That will slow my journey, Sir Flint replied cautiously. He set a bag of silver stags on the table in front of the man. I'm aware. I'll leave immediately. He paused slightly. Do I say anything about the god? Wyman hummed. No, just that the old gods are waking and there's rumors of the longest winter in living memory on our doorstep. The knight grabbed the bag of coins. I'll see it done. Good. Send in Sir Locke after you. I have a similar mission for him. Wyman was pleased as he watched the knight leave. He would ensure the North knew they had a Stark again. Lady Stark would need it, and he would give all the aid he could to her. The people would follow a Stark who united the North, girl or not. He'd see to it. She already was proving far more practical than her glorious but dead brother had been. Wyman let himself settle in the chair in the room he'd been given. He clasped his hands as his fifth night of the morning he needed to speak to come into his rooms. "Ah, Sir Locke, please take a seat." "You have orders for me?" the man asked, his voice gruff and to the point. He gestured to the seat before him. "We have work to do." Sansa carefully stitched the cloak she was preparing for her brother. She didn't cease her efforts as Brienne stepped into the room. "Yes? Maester Wolkan and the blacksmith apprentice you wish to talk to are here, my lady." Brienne's dependable and calm presence was a balm. Sansa looked up. "Send them in." She set the sewing aside, straightening her skirts. As Brienne opened the door for Wolkan and the boy, she was as proper as she'd ever been to face the court in King's Landing. "Lady Stark." Wolkan shuffled slightly as he entered. He paused to grab the boy's shoulder and haul him further into the room. "Come on, boy." She noted the boy. He had the shoulders and build of a smith and the looks of house moss. It made it rather humorous how he seemed to be desperately avoiding looking at her. "My apologies, Lady Stark," Wolkan began. "But thank you for listening to my suggestion on the matter of Fitz. The knowledge the smith must have given him is incalculable." Sansa held up a hand, his eager words falling away. It was a valuable suggestion, and would have to be framed exactly right if they meant to survive. If these actions were discovered by the god who valued the man. She looked at the boy. "What is your name?"
Cranish no milady.
He turned his hat in his hands. She softened her features. That would explain his discomfort in her presence. Especially as he clearly was not a bastard raised in his father's house. "You are a blacksmith, no?" He nodded. "I seen your apprentice at the Dreadfort. And you can read and do figures?" She continued, though she knew the answer to all these would be yes. Wolkan wouldn't have brought the boy if they weren't. Snow gave another jerky nod. "Aye, Master Ham wanted all us boys to be able to do the books and take orders when we were good enough for our own forges. Do you have a specialty in the forge?" Sansa considered him. The boy was too afraid of being in the presence of a great lady for her to get a good read on him. But in the short term he could work, even if he turned out to not be ideal. His eyes flickered up, real feeling in his words, this time. A thrum of pride, maybe even passion. "Silver work, milady." The lad's got a good head on his shoulders. Wolkan spoke up. "I had him read from the seven-pointed star for me, and his maths are as good as any merchant's." She let her mouth pull into a slight tilt of approval at that. "Very well. Cransnow, has Maester Wolkan explained why you've been brought here?" "No, milady." He was looking at her now, his eyes carefully not meeting hers, but certainly on her face, and not the ground. Sansa could work with that. Her holiness came with a companion. His name is Fitz. So long as they remain in these halls, they are my guests. But her companion, Fitz, is smith-touched. He's mad as a bag of cats. Wolkan sighed. But brilliant. Man sounded positively wistful. Sansa raised a brow and looked at the maester till he realized his error in speaking over her. Once he bowed his head, shuffling a step backwards, she continued. "He strives to create a door between our world and the world of the gods. I believe he requires assistance. Assistance I would like you to provide. And to take detailed notes on the workings of the man in order to preserve any advantage the man's mind might bring." Of course it couldn't be phrased like that. A second pair of hands for his work, which I understand to be delicate. To keep his notes, ensure he receives any supplies or tools he requires. You would of course make a good living, should you accept the position. Cran blinked, but then nodded. "I'd be honored to do that, milady." "Good, then Bauer will explain your duties to you." Sansa hoped this paid off. Yes, she was installing a spy besides the god's companion, but she meant the man no harm. Rather, she wished to know who was in her home, and if he was as brilliant as reported, any knowledge gleaned from him was likely worth the risk. It was how Cersei had described it: you lived or you died, there was no middle ground, and risks like this were the only way she would live. Opportunity didn't wait. Sansa watched from the walls as Theon and his escort disappeared down the road. She felt horribly alone. Terror clawed inside of her, desperate to crack out and devour her. It was almost a relief to hear the quiet footsteps of another person approaching her, and there were very few who Brienne would allow past her without question. "Lady Stark," the god's voice greeted. She didn't come too close, leaving just over an arm's length separating them as she stood near her on the wall. "I'm sorry your friend left." Sansa didn't look away from the fading figures along the road. "He was like a brother to me. He betrayed our family. Took our home from us, leaving my brothers alone and vulnerable in the world. But he was there when the night was so dark, I did not see an end to it." Silence fell between them, though it was not awkward or tense. There'd been an understanding in the god's voice. After some time, the god spoke again. "Betrayal never gets easier, but it only can hurt because you trusted them." Sansa felt too much, and perhaps nothing at all. So she risked a question perhaps she should not have in the quiet that had fallen between them once more. "Do you have family, Your Holiness?" The god sighed, leaning forward and against the stone bulwarks. "I was stolen from my family when I was a baby and raised in an orphanage." She seemed to consider something, a human one, thought I was human, which finding out you're not human, can't recommend it. Tin, super sucks. She turned ever so slightly, to see the face of the woman, unable to completely hide her surprise. Of course she'd had questions from what she'd heard between Fitz and this god, but hearing it confirmed she wasn't sure what it was. "My dad found me." Her face turned. It would have been bitter if she hadn't looked tired. An old wound then. He'd spent years searching. He'd done things to make himself more than human. Her lips twitched without humor. Clearly she'd noticed or felt something from Sansa then. "I'm half human. My father was the closest you have is a maester. No rules of celibacy and only the healing bits though." Sansa risked a further question then. "What happened to him?" "He went mad." The god's face was pained. "He became a monster. There are things that can make a human more than just human. But it burns away what makes the person human in the first place." She scoffed. "If it doesn't make you explode," he thought the risk was worth it, to be strong enough to save his family. Daisy looked. She grieved for this man. "When he found me, he was a monster. But sometimes when it was just us, he was almost who he was before everything happened. And he did save me, in the end." Her face tightened, but it'd been too late for him for years. He was a threat to everyone around him. So I asked a favor of Coulson, and we erased every memory and year that ruined him, and we gave him new memories. Better ones. He's a vet now. Her eyes flicked to Sansa, away from the land below them. "A person who helps sick animals?" She shrugged. "Either way, he gets to have a good life now, even if he doesn't know he ever had a wife or a daughter." Sansa had lost her father. She could understand why this god would beg a favor for this alternative to what would certainly have been death. But it was tragic in its own way, though it filled her with a sense of fear at the thought of her memories or experiences being taken from her. She looked away from the god, back out over the land. Tyrion was no longer in sight. She had questions, so many of them, but she'd pressed her luck enough. "They cut my father's head off. Was he as good a man as they say?" Daisy's voice was gentle and kind as she asked. Sansa had been forced to call her father unkind things for so long, traitor chief amongst them. It had never been safe to speak of him as he'd been. But she was in her home, and this god may be dangerous, but she had not shown herself to be cruel. He was the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms. But to me he was just my father. He was fair, kind, and loved us. He was safety and shelter in the world. The wind blew past them. The fur on Sansa's cloak tickled at her jaw. Sometimes she felt cold as ice up here, away from everything. But in this moment she was relieved. She didn't. "Is there a way I can assure you I'm not going to hurt you?" Daisy turned then, facing her fully. She must have seen something on Sansa's suddenly still features. "I see." Her head tilted to the side. "I doubt it'll help, but if it would feel free to ask, I'll answer anything, or well not be insulted by the question even if I don't answer." Sansa could feel her heart beating in her chest at that. She should have expected her court mask would only go so far with a god. But It was reasonable for the god to find her distrust irritating. Why this meant this offer she didn't know. That said, she'd spent too long in the capital to do the right thing here. It was an opportunity, and not one she could pass. Your name, is it truly yours? Daisy laughed, a bemused smile on her face. My father named me Daisy, and his surname was Johnson, so yes, it's really my name. She paused. But I've had a few names. The nuns, think your septas, called me Mary Sue Poots, which is a terrible name, and I got rid of it as soon as possible. I named myself Sky when I was 14, and went by that till I found my parents. I've used a few others in missions, but nothing I'd consider well mine. She shrugged. Why are you still here? Sansa kept her words careful and measured. Your Fitz is awake. Travel to a place with more resources, whether you don't dislike, and not on the brink of war is possible for you now. Why stay? Daisy paused as she seemed to consider that, her features and actions so incredibly human, though human blood likely explained that. Finally she replied, I broke the balance of power here. Killing the Boltons was the right choice. Her face hardened. It wasn't hard to realize they were scum. But then in the courtyard, Roose was going to send his men to hunt down and kill a man for poaching. The man's wife and any daughters as payment to the men. And oh, that clearly infuriated this god. Which explained the sudden change from formal, slightly standoffish to wrecking utter ruin. I see. It's not just that, of course. The god seemed to be struggling for words here. I'm an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Strategic Homeland Intervention Enforcement and Logistics Division, which is a very long way of saying we're the line between the world and the much bigger world that humans aren't ready for. Like there's some weird crap out there. And sure, this isn't my world, but being part of S.H.I.E.L.D. means something. It means when I hear White Walkers bring an endless night to kill every human, I can't not help. It's the right thing to do. Daisy seemed to see something in her face, and so she continued. I've learned some of your world. S.H.I.E.L.D. is an organization made up of people willing to sacrifice everything. Their lives, their bodies, their minds to protect people. It's a bit like an order of knights sworn to a master of whispers. Of my team, Ward was a traitor and is dead. Coulson died, came back in a horrifying way, lost an arm, died again. May will probably never walk without a limp. Fitz's mind is, well, it is what it is now. Gemma's probably the most whole of all of us, for a given value, and I turned out not to be human. But that's the job. No family, no kids, no roots. It's hard and is nothing but sacrifice. But it's what I believe in. Kingsguard only for the realm instead of just the king. Sansa knew that could mean less than nothing, as a moral gauge, but it was a reason. If this god thought like a soldier and had taken the long night as a mission though, Daisy gave a slight nod. Kinda, more assassination, spying, theft, and like no chastity or religious value. She snorted. Which is ironic considering how many gods we dealt with. You'd think there'd have to be a god of picking up after yourself. Sadly, no. Or if there is, they're bad at their job. She arched an eyebrow, a certain tenseness leaving her. This Daisy might not be trustworthy, and certainly dangerous, but she had nothing to motivate her but provide for her companion. Anything else was on a whim in line with her habits, but that was a far clearer level of clarity and motive than anyone from Westeros could provide. At least if she wasn't lying. Why do you care that I not fear you? Most people fear me, at least to some degree. Daisy shrugged, her manner carefree. But there was pain there that Sansa's years at court let her just barely catch the ghost of, the god continued, not giving time for her words to be considered without it feeling like she was distracting from what she'd said. But I can be of more use than you're asking of me. Daisy was tired and in an odd way bored. She'd never missed her phone so much in her life. No wonder everyone could do some kind of music, drank too much alcohol, and everything was crafted to a gorgeous degree. There was nothing else to do. She was pretty sure she'd read more in the last 2.5 months than she had in the last 10 years of her life. Maybe if she just shoved her face into this book on the rule of King Jatkarsai, it would be absorbed and she wouldn't have to look at it anymore. Your Holiness, a voice asked from behind her. She looked over her shoulder and grinned. A distraction that promised to give her an excuse to leave the library. Please say you're here to tell me there's something that needs me. I am not. I wish to ask if you were done with the volume besides you. The woman's posture was painfully formal as she looked pointedly at the book on the seasons of Westeros. But what was more noticeable was just frankly how she was clearly unique among women in this world. And forget the book. Daisy was taking advantage of the opportunity in front of her. Daisy smiled, hoping to put the woman at ease, if the woman was capable of untensing. You know, I worked with a woman about your height a few years ago. She was a pretty awesome warrior too. You're not unique as a woman warrior in your world? Brienne asked, her face cracking slightly in surprise. She nodded easily. I was trained by a woman. She was tiny, the scariest person I've ever seen. Took down whole legions of soldiers without any powers or abilities. Just a human who punched gods in the face. A formidable woman. Brienne hesitated, but then spoke. I don't know what you want or are planning, but God or not, I will not let you hurt Lady Stark. Daisy's smile grew. I've seen humans fell gods before. Orwell Cree, and apparently aliens were gods now. Bullshit, but fine. Good. Brienne gave a solemn nod. I will die before any harm comes to Lady Stark. Daisy took a moment to think how to deal with this. She didn't feel like getting stabbed in the back by a badass lady knight. You should probably teach me how to use the weapons from this world. 'Cause I'm gonna be honest. I don't have a clue how to use any of this stuff, except for the knives. You want to learn how to use a sword? Brienne frowned slightly. She grinned. And the bow, frankly, I'm bored. I can be way more useful than just for turning castles to dust and snapping necks. I'm sure one of the others could teach you. Brienne's jaw tightened. I'm needed at Lady Stark's side. Daisy stood up from the library table. You are, but not all the time. I can begin to teach you the bow before I'm required back at Lady Stark's side. Brienne allowed while stepping to the side. She loped over to the knight. So I'm most used to a weapon similar to a bow, but it's used completely differently. Let's see what you can do. Brienne turned and marched towards the courtyard. Daisy beamed. That was someone who needling would be easy. Probably inadvisable, most of the time. But the woman was one of the good or evil sorts. Kinda like Talbot had been, before. So I don't see a lot of lady knights here, and like your totes a snack. But that doesn't seem usual around these parts. I did not understand that. Brienne was looking at her. Baffled, Daisy laughed. I'm saying you're an attractive lady. Especially for people into their lover, being able to bench press them. Which that is so a thing. She winked at the woman. But I'm pretty sure you're not just a knight 'cause you've got the whole blessed by the gods for war build going on, right? Blessed by the gods? Brienne's cheeks had heated, and she was looking at Daisy like she was some sort of crazy. I was good at it. It was my path, and no one has ever gotten me to give it up. Daisy snickered. Did you break the rules so you could kick ass? I don't back down. Brienne led them out from the halls and into the yard. She deftly ignored how the attention of everyone there focused on them as she picked up a bow from the rack. You are very strange. Daisy accepted the bow. That's a step up. Usually it's all monster and where you go. Death follows. Or my friends saying they need protection from me. I don't think I've gone from terrifying to just strange in less than 3 months before. Your own people fear you. Brienne's hand didn't release the bow. She sighed. Change is terrifying, and it took me a long time to learn how to use my powers. I still haven't really mastered them. I just don't bring down buildings because I had a nightmare anymore. Why are you telling me this? Brienne frowned. Daisy pulled the bow out of Brienne's hand. Because I'd like to not be stabbed in the back. I think you'd rather know I'm dangerous than fear how dangerous I might be. Daisy turned towards the targets and took her side shooting stance. So I'm guessing I used the notch here on the arrow to attach it to the string. Yes. Lay it along the hand grip. Brienne watched with sharp eyes. Pull back as you raise the arrow towards the target. Don't straighten your arm. The woman tapped her arm till it was bent ever so slightly. The string will take your skin off if your arm is where it shouldn't be. Yes. There, press your thumb to the edge of your mouth. Good. Just release when you're ready. Daisy breathed out, feeling her heart slow, and then relaxed her fingers, the arrow loosing towards the target. She ignored Brienne's sound of approval. 4 inches from the center. Taking another arrow, she notched it and pulled the bow back again. She adjusted her aim slightly, and then loosened. Daisy grinned as she lowered her arm. Bullseye. How? Brienne was gaping. She winked at the woman. I've used a weapon similar to this, not this, slow though. Guns were way more practical. Daisy picked up another arrow. I'll keep working on it, till this doesn't feel weird. Daisy's muscles ached with a familiar and welcome burn. She set her bow back on the rack. Stepping forward, she made her way to the target and started pulling arrows out. I get why Hawkeye used a bow now. She pulled out yet more arrows. Maybe she went a bit too long. This damn target was half hedgehog with all these arrows. Finally, she carried the bundle of arrows back and dumped them in the bucket. Daisy paused, eyeing the courtyard. It was certainly a more pleasant area without the corpses. Your Holiness. Hogg came jogging towards her. Daisy smiled as she saw the guy she was starting to consider a sort of friend. Bit of a puppy. Do you need something? Some of the men were, wondering about your thoughts on visiting the whorehouse. I pulled the short straw for asking you. His cheeks were bright red. Daisy snorted. You want to ask me about whether hiring a prostitute is okay or not? Well, some of the men think you're a patron god of maidens and that sort of thing might not be a good idea. He winced, licking at his lips nervously. She rolled her eyes. I'm not a patron god of maidens, and as long as you're not hurting anyone, I don't see a problem with it. Your future wife might, but I don't care.
Do you think it'll make it harder to find a wife?
He asked, frowning as if such a thing had never occurred to him. Daisy patted his shoulder. Definitely. But we're men, it's how men are. Hogg tried to explain, his ears turning red. She wanted to cackle. Fake religion was turning out. Kinda fun. First of all, I happen to know you idiots are strong enough to keep your dicks in your pants, if you want. She saw the other clearly eavesdropping men wilting. Men are the same in every world. Is that a bad thing? Joran asked carefully. Daisy squeezed his shoulder in sympathy. He was just a teen. Look, women are just as sexual as men. What? Joran looked at her with wide, horrified eyes. That's not possible. Buddy, Daisy dragged him to the side and shoved him onto a bench. It's true. Women are just as human as you men are, and finding a wife will be harder when you're wasting your money, treating women like objects, and expecting your future spouse to be virtuous while you're off doing whatever feels nice. The man was practically drooping, but you people clearly do not listen to the women in your lives enough. That said, there's nothing wrong with going to a brothel. Just don't be an ass about it. And know if you hurt the girls there, I'll revisit those pains 100 times over on the idiot who did it. Good? Yes. Joran ran a hand through his hair. Do you think, are the 7 hells real? Daisy blinked. Probably. I know of one realm where your fears are made real, and I punched the guy in the face who takes souls to the hells. So I'm gonna go with they're probably real. I also know the dude who takes souls doesn't care if you spent your money at a brothel. I think I'm gonna go to the God's Wood. Hogg nodded before sprinting off. She huffed, shaking her head. As she stood there, she felt more serious. As she'd worked on her powers, and the Dark Ages and space travel had that in common. Lots of time to work on control. She'd found noticing the world around her by vibration was beginning to come naturally. She could feel Fitz in his workshop. Daisy pulled her cloak back on as she walked, which how the hell they were meant to grow anything in this weather she didn't know. Your Holiness, a woman bustled over, and then promptly shoved a baby into her arms. Daisy blinked as she automatically tucked the kid against her. She wasn't surprised when the woman then promptly left, as fast as she could, without actually fleeing. Shaking her head slightly, she kept walking. Once at Fitz's door, she rapped her knuckles on the wood before stepping in. Hey sup. Once at Fitz's door, she rapped her knuckles on the wood before stepping in. Hey sup, Daisy. He looked up from work, only to pause. Is that a baby? She rubbed the kid's back. They think I'm a god of maidens, or children. Women just shove kids at me and run. Whoever this guy belongs to will be back in an hour or so. Fitz stared and then scoffed. That's ridiculous. I know, but it's not a big deal, so, whatever. Daisy hopped up on his work table, and no judgment. Don't think I don't see the minion you've somehow acquired. Fitz's hands were ink-stained. A certain manic energy to him that was unstoppable by anything short of Nazis or Gemma in a low-cut top, and new lingerie. Lady Sansa gave him to me. Do they just give children to people here? I'm pretty sure I get handed kids so they can be blessed. Daisy twitched. Is this what the Pope feels like? 'Cause it's weird. She hid her smirk against the baby's hair. She was amused that Lady Stark had apparently been proactive in installing a spy with Fitz. It was smart kid might not even know he was a spy. She'd pass her compliments on the maneuver to the woman later. Lady Stark has been very gracious. So a tiny amount of manners if you emerge from this place. Fitz's nose scrunched as he went back to his design, which looked like it would be one of his dwarves. The sooner we're gone, the better. If I can confirm we're in the same reality. I just need to make a beacon, and Gemma will find us. That is the hope. Daisy paused. If it is the case, we're still helping with their ice zombies, White Walkers, whatever evil magic is happening. Fitz hummed under his breath. Septas. Sure. She wondered when she'd stopped understanding him, or maybe begun to understand him too well. Do you need my help with the beacon? No. Fitz grabbed what looked like several coins and likely a chemical of some kind. Daisy could tell when she wasn't going to be of any help. She glanced at the baby. I guess we're reading about Jaffwers. Looking back up at Fitz, she just felt sad. I'll be back to make sure you've eaten and plan to sleep. I've got to finish this. His voice was sharp, an edge that he'd be angry if she pushed. She wanted to flinch, though she refused to do so. If you collapse, it'll take longer, and you know it. Daisy didn't wait for his reply. She just left. Lord Umber had half a mind to cause his horse to break out in a gallop at the sight of Stark banners flying from Winterfell. He'd spent the better part of half a moon being fed proper food and given the use of his limbs. The toll of the war and his imprisonment would never leave him, but he felt a man again, instead of a husk of rage. You fuckers weren't lying, but why else would we have given you an axe? Joran, the captain of the men escorting him, replied. His voice was surprisingly dry for a man of his youth. He scoffed. Yeah, cunts came in Bolton colors. Couldn't know for sure if I was going to be fighting you with my axe when we reached Winterfell or not. But his voice held only the echo of the familiar boom he'd once spoken with. Joran gave a look. Lady Stark is aware honor has its place, and it's after the well-being of her people. That's Tully words, lot of good those fish did us. His face hardened. The South and its lords and ways could fuck themselves. The men didn't say anything. Instead, they just rode. As they approached, the gates were proven to be open. Umber thought the great fortress of the north was in better repair than it deserved to be, after being burned by the Greyjoy scum and then filled with Boltons. As they entered the courtyard, his eyes rested on the woman who could only be the once tiny Sansa. He dismounted. Lord Umber, welcome to Winterfell. Sansa greeted. You are most welcome. She waved forward to a servant with bread and salt. He looked the girl up and down. She was tall, red hair, very neat. Odd world this. Stark banners for Lady Bolton. My marriage ended when I stabbed my husband. Sansa's posture didn't change. I was born a Stark. I will always be a Stark. No matter what I have been forced to do to survive. Umber considered her. He took the bread and salt and ate it. I've had a room prepared for you and a bath drawn. If you wish to send word to your family, there is paper and ink in your room. Maester Walken will send out any missive you wish. She was cold but perfect as she spoke. Great Sean Umber submerged himself in the large metal tub of hot water. He didn't even consider letting it cool. Scrubbing with soap, he wiped the grime of his travel and imprisonment from his skin. It felt like his outer layer of skin was half scalded off. He reveled in the cleanliness. It'd been years. His disused and abused body ached as the water eased his pains. His chest felt sharp and painful with grief. Shame and anger that left him numb for so long. When he finally emerged from his bath, he was surprised to find fresh clothing nearly his size. Slightly loose, but clearly prepared ahead of his arrival, and meant for him laid out on the bed. Besides a small mirror, however, was cream, a razor as well as scissors, as well as several combs. His eyes tracked the room. There on the side table was a large mug of ale, and a plate of meat and bread soaking in its own juices. In fact, the room had been specifically prepared for him, and with great thought to what his needs might be. He scoffed. He didn't need the pampering of some southern cunt, but he wasn't a fool, and his stomach panged him at the smell of the meal. He was freshly dressed, and just cutting into his meal when there was a rap on the door. Umber grumbled before calling out. Fuck manners. Get in here instead of standing out there like some damned fool. The door opened, and the fat Lord Manderley walked in. Servant on his heels. Well, I should hope that greeting wasn't intended for me. The man chortled. Umber stretched backwards in his wooden chair. So you've thrown your lot in with the girl. I'll give it to her stabbing that shit. Ramsay was well done, but she's a damn southerner. Why should I care for whatever plot she means to use me in? I see captivity hasn't beaten any more manners or thought into your head than you had there before you left. Wyman waved for the servant to fill a cup and set food before himself. as he hefted himself into the chair across from Umber. The chair groaned under the weight of the man, but it held. He laughed at that as he took a drag from his mug of ale. Same as always, Merman. I'll take that as a compliment, you old fool. He waved the servant away as food was set before him. Umber rubbed absently at the scars he would bear for his life from his manacles. You knelt to those flayed bastards. It was an indictment. Wyman didn't flinch. They returned my son to me for it. And if you think I held anything but a knife and poison in my hand for the Boltons, he took a pull from his cup of wine. I had meant, with the aid of your uncles, as well as several other houses, to recover Rickon Stark and put a Stark back in power. And yet there's a girl ruling this tiny corner of the north. Umber's face tightened. He'd had some news of the actions of his uncles since his imprisonment. The Freys had thought it entertaining to torture their prisoners with news of calamity and harm they could do naught to prevent. Manderley looked at him. That girl is as much a Stark as any of Ned's pups. But don't take my word for it, judge her for yourself. Oh, I will. Umber had followed a young Stark before, to glory and for revenge. It'd been short glorious and had turned to blood and death. He would not do so again. Sansa grit her teeth as Bauer approached her. What news? There's been reports of Ramsay's hunters to the southeast. They've been ravaging the lands, raping, then murdering their way. Bauer didn't falter before her displeasure, one of the benefits of keeping him as a part of her household. Something she'd been considering. But that was an issue. How many men are a part of this? Reports vary, but likely around 15, with the hounds. Bauer couldn't help the cringe at the mention of Ramsay's hounds. Sansa felt a shiver of revolution at the reminder of the dogs. She looked at Brienne, who was standing by her shoulder. Brienne, take 20 of the men, and hunt down these bandits. Kill the hounds. Kill or capture the men. My lady, your brother has not returned yet. My place is by your side. Brienne's voice was stiff. She was practically incapable of falsehood. She focused on her sworn sword. The men here are inexperienced and young. Sending them after the more experienced men would be suicide. I trust you to do this. Sansa measured her words carefully. And for now I believe I'll be secure while her holiness remains. It was becoming clear that Daisy was like a dire wolf or other predator. Dangerous, but not without cause or reason. Brienne gave a stiff nod. If you feel it is necessary. She couldn't have sounded more unhappy at the suggestion. I do. Sansa felt cold. I cannot allow this to continue. She could not allow this to take away from her authority, while Lord Ember and Lord Manderley were here. Her task was monumental, but she was the daughter of Ned Stark. They owed her their allegiance. Allegiance they would not give if she proved unable to manage her own lands. Bauer spoke again. The party to recover more of the Dreadfort's supplies is prepared to set out within the hour. Good news, is there more required for them to depart? She inquired. It was vital that the last of the supplies were brought to Winterfell. Already the loot had proved to have secured her hold of Winterfell and its lands. She had the food, equipment, and gold to run the Stark lands. He shook his head. No, they are only waiting on the last of the spare axles for the carts. Is there other news? She needed to know what other catastrophe was on its way for her. Bauer's brow furrowed. Lord Manderley and Lord Umber have been speaking. Lord Umber seems to be against you, milady. Of course he is. Sansa's eyes narrowed. It was to be expected. It'd taken Robb letting Greywind biting 2 of the man's fingers off to get him behind him. She had neither a direwolf to command, the position as heir, nor was she a warrior or man. The lords of the north are hard-headed and stubborn as mules. Bear shook his head. You've saved him, given him guest right, and your hospitality. It's not right. But it is what it is, and sure no one attempts to act in my defense towards him. He is my guest, and is to be treated as such. Sansa ordered. She would not have men sworn to her acting stupidly in her defense, and making everything worse. She would not and could not tolerate it. What else? Her eyes narrowed as she realized the man was sweating in front of her. Bauer actually cringed at that. That's just... It seems Lady Bolton has felt the first of her birthing pangs in the night. Maester Walcon confirmed, and is with her as of an hour ago. Why wasn't I informed immediately? Sansa's spine was iron as she demanded that answer. His shoulders hunched slightly. I'm sorry, milady. I didn't want to tell you just before you received Lord Umber. Sansa considered the man before her. You are my master of arms, and have been acting as both that, and as my sensical. Temporary as the position may be, it is still your duty. I am aware you are not trained, nor were you prepared for your position, and you certainly have earned a senior position in my household. However, you must never keep me in the dark, no matter your intentions. She faced him fully. He had to understand this. Knowledge was a form of power she desperately needed and could not lose. If you ever hide or delay the truth like this again, I'll have you removed from Winterfell. If you ever lie to me, I will have you sent to the wall. Do you understand? Yes, milady. He bobbed his head, eyes wide. Sansa felt no mercy. She couldn't afford more than she had just shown. Good. I will not overlook it again. Sansa shut the library doors behind her. She had never appreciated the library when she had been a child. But she'd come to appreciate the quiet, empty rows full of dusty tomes of knowledge. If it'd been a time of peace, she'd have written for more books to be sent from Old Town. As it was a nice dream for, if they survived all of this. With Maester Walcon attending to Lady Bolton, there'd be no one in the library, except for the person she was looking for. Holiness, you suggested I speak with you more often. Lady Stark? The god looked up from the large tome. She brightened, straightening in her seat. Yeah, did you need something? Sansa carefully took the implied invitation to sit across from the god. She'd accepted that this woman was likely one of her most trustworthy allies, even if she was wary and unsure of how far that went. Walda Bolton is in labor. Ah, Daisy shut her book. So you need a distraction from your mortal enemy having a kid. She let her shoulders untighten ever so slightly. Letting them live is the right decision, but it's also the foolish one. Why is it the foolish one? Daisy asked. Sansa paused, but she replied, What do you mean? The child will be the only living scion of House Bolton, of the bloodline of the Red Kings. A child who will be born in a world ruled by House Stark, their ancestral enemies, their prospects and future ruined. Sorry if I'm wrong, but you plan to break the enemies of your house here in the north. Daisy gave her a knowing look. You told your brother you'd think about it, but you'll do it. Am I wrong? No. Sansa didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. There was no point in lying. The woman before her would know if she did. Daisy sighed. Then who would try to raise up a Bolton? Who loves the Boltons? I mean, I'm not from here. I'm just reading about this world. She gestured at the book. But who would choose a Bolton against a Stark? Once you're done, who would make that choice? But I'm not done yet. Sansa considered the god's words. But a babe is a poor symbol to rally behind. When had her fears clouded her? I've been foolish. Daisy shrugged. From what I can tell, you're surrounded by enemies and allies who haven't chosen you yet. Lord Umber isn't alone. The rest of the lords won't forget I've been a Lannister and a Bolton, in name if not in heart. She looked away from the god to the window, light streaming in. It will take time to win them without an enemy to rally against. She had a slight frown in her voice. You have your choice of enemies. I do, and winter is coming. I have time to gather my allies. Sansa turned back to the god. You wouldn't happen to have an easy option for ensuring Lord Umber knows I'm Stark and have the will to succeed. Daisy leaned back in her seat. How'd everyone else do it? My father led them to war against the Targaryens after they murdered my grandfather and uncle and stole and raped my aunt. My brother led them to war against the Lancers after they attempted to murder my brother, murdered my father and stole Arya and I. Not that they ever had Arya, but no one knew that. Sansa swallowed. I don't have more family to sacrifice as martyrs. Daisy looked at her. But you're rallying them for the living. It's harder. She tapped her fingers on the table. I got nothing on any grand gesture to win their loyalty, but maybe you don't need one. You advised time then. Sansa was oddly disappointed to be advised what she already knew was the truth, but reassured at the same time. Her eyes noted the scarring on the side of the god's neck. It was funny, the woman had a scar on her cheek, but it never seemed important before. You can scar. Daisy reached up, touching the mark. Her face was... She moved her hair the rest of the way, off of her neck, showing the awful-looking mark on her neck. He used my trust in him to hit me from behind, drugged me, tied me down and cut into me till he'd taken what he wanted. She dropped her hand. Sansa's heart quickened at the memories her words invoked. But you survived. So did you. Daisy held her gaze and then she turned more friendly. In any case, unless you want me to beat Lord Umber up for you, I don't think I have much to give you there. Her lips twitched at the image of the woman before her punching Lord Umber in the face. I doubt that'd be useful, but thank you for the offer. She gave a look at the book. Why do you read so much? I'm in a strange world, how else am I meant to understand it? Daisy looked amused. Also, I got to say, this world's lack of internet's super terrible. Sansa humored herself. What is the internet? It's sort of like, if all the books of the world, art, knowledge, and your ravens carrying letters were in one giant invisible web across the world, and people could access that information, send messages, play games, whatever they want across all of it, instantly. When I was human, I was a hacker, or a person who broke the codes guarding information on the internet. I found everyone's dirty secrets, and made it public for everyone to know. Her grin was predatory then, a light in her eye that was distinctly passionate. The concept boggled the mind, but for a realm of gods it sounded appropriately wondrous. She couldn't hardly comprehend it, but the potential for such magic, I can barely imagine. It's pretty awesome. Daisy was fond. So what do your northern lords respect other than strength? Sansa settled as she spoke the truth she knew down to her bones. Plain speech, following the old ways, being true to your word, stubborn bullheadedness. She preferred her own people to those of the south. Their values were different. Their ways, the politics were in some ways the same. But not all. So that a hold back on the freezing people to death for attempted murder. 'Cause going to be honest, there's a distinct risk of exploding the person on accident. When I do that, Daisy winced in disgust at that thought of exploding a person. Sansa wondered how the magic worked for that to be a possibility. She didn't see any connection between the two, but apparently there was one. I would prefer to gain their allegiance on my own power, but I would not think to order your actions. I'm a soldier, sorta. Daisy shrugged. Well, one who never stopped arguing with orders. I didn't like. You can ask. I'll probably be willing. I kinda owe you for everything you've done for Fitz and me. The Sansa was unsure by what metric she was the one in this partnership who had offered more, but she had no intention of questioning that. It's been my honor, I'm sure. Daisy's eyes sparked with amusement. Nice touch with the new assistant you gifted Fitz. Smart. Her blood felt like it ran cold. She should have expected the woman to realize, but this quickly. It'd been a day. But then she'd said she'd been a spy. It'd been stupid to hope the god wouldn't notice the spy. Inserted besides her companion. I meant no offense. None taken. Daisy didn't seem offended, mostly amused, though she was serious as she kept speaking. It was a good idea, and one you should continue. Fitz is one of my two closest and dearest friends. He's the closest thing I have to a brother. And her amusement was gone now. But he has two people in him. He's mainly Fitz, the dork I'd trust with anything. But sometimes, he isn't that person, and the person he becomes is a monster. If I'm ever not here, you should ensure your guards keep an eye on him. Sansa pressed her lips together. How dangerous is he? Who do you think gave me that scar? Daisy wasn't lounging in her chair. There was a tenseness to her. It's not his fault exactly, but it doesn't change the fact he's capable of it. Sansa's eyes widened slightly. A human capable of doing that to a god was horrifically dangerous. Not to mention the concept of still calling a man who was willing to violate you in such a way a friend and brother was. She didn't understand, but she didn't need to. I'll see it done. Good. Daisy eased ever so slightly. He's not an active threat. I'll keep that in mind. Sansa wondered at the truth of two minds in one head. It could be metaphor or literal when it came to this. She had to ensure she brought no insult, however. You truly don't mind the assistant? Daisy shook her head. He's brilliant. If the kid learns anything from Fitzid, it'll be good for you. And it's not like there's any information on us that could harm us. Benefits of not being from the same world. You're very certain of his loyalty, despite everything. Sansa could probably do a lot to ensure the hurt between this god and her companion was widened if she set her mind to it. After all, while subtle she had noticed the caution Daisy seemed to hold herself with when Fitz was near, though she couldn't have guessed the reason. Daisy didn't look bothered by the implication. You mean the risk of turning against each other, if it was just Fitz and I? Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. But he'd never betray Gemma. And we both want to return to where she is. You've mentioned that name before? Sansa pointed out. Daisy smiled. His wife, and my best friend, which it's a bit ridiculous. I spent a year with Gemma trying to rescue him, only for everything to go to hell, and now I'm trapped with him trying to get to her. They better name their first kid after me." Her voice had laughter in it, like she actually wouldn't take it personally if the future child wasn't named for her. "You are a very strange god," Sansa found herself saying almost despite herself. The god shrugged. "I mean, you can call me a god, and Fitz a demigod. My enemy's a monster, at this point. Does it even matter?" In some ways, Sansa wondered if she'd underestimated how human this woman was. Perhaps not, but she would have the time to find out. Daisy adjusted the castle gauntlets on her arms. Her own were safely in her rooms. There was no point in risking them when these would work just as fine. Besides, she wasn't using her powers. "You can swing at me, Jaran, but you haven't a sword, Your Holiness," the man protested. She rolled her eyes. "I'm perfectly able to fight without a sword, though I should probably figure out how to use one eventually. For now, though, swing at me." Poor kid wouldn't be able to hurt her if he wanted to. He was clearly a fairly competent man, but also with minimal experience and no focused training. Finally, he moved, swinging weakly at her arm. Daisy slapped the blade to one side with her palm. "Come on, you can do better than that." Again, and her voice was an order now. Joran finally seemed to realize not trying to stab her was irritating her. He actually took a proper swing. She flowed around the blade without touching it, grabbed his throat and slammed him to the ground as she hooked his ankle. "Better." Daisy held out her hand to the guy. Jaran took the hand. "How'd you do that?" "Practice. Don't fully commit like that if your opponent isn't tied down." Daisy flicked her fingers, beckoning him forward. He braced himself and then swung lower and towards her center of mass. She flicked her wrist, knocking the blow away from her. Swinging forward, she caught his wrist and punched him in the face. As he stumbled from it, she hooked his ankle and yanked. He hit the ground. There were appreciative woos from the men. Daisy rolled her neck and beckoned another of the men forward. "Well, come on then." The man paled, but stepped forward. He gave a sharp cry and attacked with great arching swings. Daisy easily sidestepped 3 attacks before stepping into his guard. She kneed him in the gut before flipping him to the ground. Next, Daisy grinned at the 24 very bruised men stuck with her in the yard. "Better, but you have to be defending while you're attacking. If I can get to you with my fist, a person with a sword will have stabbed you." She sighed. The guys hadn't realized how badly they'd done. They were clearly writing it off as obvious, since she was a god. Joran rubbed at his bruised jaw. "Should we practice against each other?" "Yes, but first all of you against me at the same time. If I have to use my powers to escape injury, you win." Daisy rolled her shoulders. One of the boys glanced nervously at the others before speaking up. "What happens if we lose?" Endurance training. Daisy knew her grin looked slightly vicious. There wasn't the appropriate fear on the men's faces. "Easy fix. You run till you puke." "Ugh, fuck that." One of the older guys grunted, and then charged in. Daisy laughed as she batted his sword away, slamming him face first into the dirt. As she moved, she continued to pick the men's skills apart, which were fairly abysmal, really. Sure, they were better than a bar drunk, and weapons and leather armor helped, but frankly, they were clearly cannon fodder, lined up shoulder to shoulder with some shields, and they'd do some damage. But in an actual fight, if their line got broken, they'd be sitting ducks. She used her grip around one guy's head to swing herself around, kicking 2 others. Hard. As her feet hit the ground, she rolled the guy she'd used to swing herself over her shoulder and directly into a different opponent. Sansa set her quill down and looked up at Bauer. "Good you're here. I need you to prepare a riding party of 3 to ride to House Saracen's keep." "Milady? Surely we need more men to take a keep, unless you mean for Her Holiness to join us." The man frowned slightly. She raised a brow at the man. Her men questioned her actions far too freely. It would take time to earn their trust. They bent the knee after Lord Serwyn was flayed alive. Nearly half their bannermen slaughtered, and their stores and coffers hobbled. "I'm not punishing them for that. This is a message for them that you are going to send personally by hand instead of by raven." "Apologies, mighty." He bowed and fled to see to her orders. Sansa sighed. She was really going to have to replace the man. He would stay in the household, but he wasn't competent in his current position. A problem for another day. She glanced up at the knock on her door. Enter. Wyman Manderley took up the whole doorway as he lumbered in. "Lady Stark, you asked to speak with me this morning." "I did. Please." She waved to the chair before her desk in her solar. Our trade with Essos, I wish to discuss tripling it at least. His eyes widened. An admirable goal. And one more possible with the new ships you've asked my men to build. A task I've already written to my son and asked him to begin. But Sansa had no interest in however long he intended to speak around his issue. She was tired of being spoken to like an idiot. Wyman's eyes glinted as he looked at her. It's expensive, and building ships will take time. And I'll personally provide 2.5 million dragons for the purchase. Transport of grains from Essos to Winterfell. She held his eye. I've also written an order for giving taxes for the coming winter should those funds be used for winter trade, in the amount equaling what is spent on purchasing food from other realms. He groaned slightly as he leaned back in his seat. That would ensure the food was purchased, but building ships takes time, as would finding and/or training the men required for such work. Efforts that the approaching winter will slow even further. It's a good thought, and I might even have thoughts on speeding up your efforts to ensure we remain fed through winter. But perhaps you're being too ambitious to start, my lady. He tipped his head respectfully. Sansa pressed her fingers together so hard they turned white from it, under the table and out of sight of the tell at how frustrated she was. I also intend to use another 500,000 in gold dragons to purchase ships with crews from Essos for the work. I would welcome your ideas, but if we're not ambitious now, we will starve later. Or do you think our people will thank us for our caution when the snows fall, the cold seeps in through even the warmest hearths, and the food stores run out? Peace, you've made your point. He seemed to consider her. It could be done, but surely that would ruin your finances, even with the wealth you've no doubt acquired from your victory over the Boltons. Sansa raised a brow. The Iron Bank knows a sound investment, and debts can be repaid in summer. We have wood, land, and ore, if we bothered to mine it. There is wealth to be found if we invest in our land, as your house can attest. But to reap that, we must first survive. Well said. Wyman folded his hands in front of him, his face setting deeply. My cousin Marlon, a Mormont or Umbran Leasa Flint would make a fine delegation to the Iron Bank. They would also be well placed to begin purchasing the ships you intend to acquire, as well as establishing the trade relation we would need. Sansa was unsurprised by his suggestion, as I'm sure the Flintons of Widow's Watch would do as you bid, making them a reliable option for you. Lady Lessa has a good head on her shoulders, and her boy is old enough she need not take the boy with her. Wyman didn't argue the advantage having a house that served him in all but name would bring. She considered his proposition. It has to be an Umber. There's only Lyanna Mormont left of that house. Save for the exiled Jorah, Sansa ran through what she knew of her lords and their houses. Barrett Moss. He's third in line for the family, and avoided my brother's war due to breaking his leg falling from his horse. But he's of a good age. Roose was planning to flay him alive, and would make a suitable leader of such an expedition. Don't you agree? And of a noble house that owes mine own house nothing. He chuckled, but his face showed approval. Well chosen, if he accepts your call. She didn't waver. I'm the Stark of Winterfell, and once news of what I intend to bring upon those houses who failed their oaths to mine, I doubt any will ignore the call. Smart. Wyman shifted slightly. Now, let's see what we can do about ensuring our trade plan is one that will work. Sansa's brow arched. Our plan? I would of course be honored to participate. His lips twitched. She opened a drawer of her desk and pulled up the plan she'd worked out earlier. Some of the details would of course need to be adjusted. I believe this would be an adequate start to our plan. I believe it will. And Wyman was openly impressed, now as he took the plan, and began to read through it. Very fine indeed. Fitz stared at Daisy, testing the movement of the sword some idiot had handed to her. Is a septa sword really necessary? Totally. Daisy winked at him before taking a swing for the wood and straw dummy. He nearly jumped. He did yelp, as the sword went straight through the thing. What was that? Serum. Daisy grinned manically as she checked the sword wasn't bent. Fitz's mind filled with the numbers of how much force that would have required. The sword certainly hadn't been sharp enough, or Daisy a master of the art for that to have been in any way what was supposed to happen. Impressed, if very dirty, and men running circles around the yard could attest to that. But then Daisy was strong, incredibly fit, which not as enhanced as Mike had been, but certainly more than what run-of-the-mill steroids could do for a person. Well, that's something. One hand ran through his hair. Exactly. Daisy began to adjust her usual stances as she got a feel for the sword. Bloody useless use of time, but it wasn't like there was much for her to do while the men ran. So he spoke. He had run out of what he could do without feedback from Gemma. His theory was, if he talked at Daisy, she'd make a suitable replacement for a sounding board. It couldn't make his problems less immense anyways. I believe I know how to reset in if we're in an alternate reality. Jesus, already? Daisy looked at him surprised. Fitz groaned. I have to build it first, but if I make a Tesla coil, I should be able to measure its interactions with the electric lightning. Phosphorescence, X-ray GG generation, high-frequency alternating current phenomena, transmission of electrical energy, and really just deceptive. That alone would give us a B baseline of the natural rules of this P planet. If the V variance from Earth standard is too averted, we know there's phenomena, not a rules supported by our universe. Right, makes perfect sense. There was sarcasm there. How are you going to make the electricity to generate the thing though? He grimaced. Well, it's not like there's easy access to a rare river. I'm guessing potatoes like for those clocks is out. Daisy shot a glare at one of the guys who was beginning to lag behind the others. Jesser, pick it up. Fitz noticed the general misery and exhaustion of the men. He didn't envy them one bit. Kinda genius to use physical ops training to weed out as many men as possible from the cult. Thing she was making though. Most people weren't made to make it through that kind of physical punishment. I was thinking a pedal bike. If you made a few, we could stick a few of the boys on them. Daisy gestured to the wheezing men. It'd be good for them. He perked up at that. That could well work. It's not a lot, but that god would get us rolling. And I've been looking into making batteries using some of the coins they have here. If I fix up the batteries, I can store what they produce. It wouldn't be a lot, but I can well work with that. How are you going to get enough wire for a Tesla coil? Daisy suddenly paused. Fitz blinked. Hacker. Sometimes he forgot she'd know enough about this sort of thing to understand at least a bit of what he was doing. A lot of work, he frowned. I don't think you're supposed to swing that like a baseball bat. I was getting that feeling too. Daisy looked at her sword with a frown. I've got no idea what I'm doing with the thing, and neither do these guys, clearly. Fitz felt some pity for the idiots who definitely didn't have much longer in them. He cringed as one of them keeled over and started puking his guts out. I think he broke one. You can stop. Daisy barely finished the permission to stop before the men just dropped where they'd been staggering in an attempt to run. A small symphony of groans as they hit the ground. Don't get too comfortable. We're stretching it out after you can breathe again. She turned her attention back to Fitz. So how soon can you have those bikes and batteries ready? He rubbed at his chin. A week, maybe. Are there even going to be enough men wanting to keep training with you by then? We'll manage. Daisy frowned slightly. I'm nicer than May. A few of them will stick it out. Fitz nodded. That was a fair point. He was quite used to the parade of misery that was whichever poor fucks were being trained by the cavalry for strike teams. Fair point. Grichon Umber drank deeply from his cup. He watched from the window as the charlatan and witch who was masquerading as a god ran some of the men through ridiculous actions in the yard. What nonsense is that? Is it harmful? Sansa asked without blinking. He scoffed. It's useless, but not harmful. Sansa stared at him. And she believes it's useful. What is it you plan to do now that you're free? Grichon eyed the girl, but he wasn't ignorant of what her half-brother was off doing for her. It was clear the girl would take the north. But could she hold it? He saw little to her that said she had the stomach to do it. My uncle says he rides for us. Let us hope his quest to find my brother has been a success. She was every inch the perfect lady. Even Lady Catelyn would have looked like a girl playing the role besides her daughter. It was whether that poise covered a southern soul or a northern one that worried him. He eyed her. Yeah, don't need that forging witch. She'll take you the same way Stannis' Red Witch did. It's possible. Sansa allowed. However, I have given her my word and I will not break that so easily. Besides, I have her watched and she seems disinclined towards burning innocents and guilty alike to power dark magic. Umber rubbed his beard. Disgust in him at that. Spies? A necessary evil, and one my brother and father lacked to their detriment. Or do you disagree, despite what you've suffered? She raised a brow staring at him, like one would look at a small child that made a fool mistake. His shoulders tightened at the challenge and rebuke. Your father and brother had honor, and they died for it. There was an edge of emotion there. She cared, and honor is good, but it wasn't honor that forged the Winter Kingdom. Do you think it was honor that led my ancestors to killing House Frost to the last man, woman, and child, or House Greystark of our own blood? We've wiped out full houses before, and I'll have done it at least once more before winter truly comes. His eyes widened as he looked at the girl again. She spoke of eradication without a single hair out of place, not a crack to her voice. And there was only one house that she could mean to destroy, especially if she thought to mention House Greystark. You mean to end House Corstark? They turned on our men at the Red Wedding, or those few men who had not already left their king did. I will not tolerate such betrayal from a house bound by blood. And in that moment, there was the same edge to her that had been there to Robb. A certain viciousness, a predatory air that led to so many of the Starks being called wolves. Umber felt a deep satisfaction. Fuck the traitors. He set his cup down with a thud. I'll see you have House Umber's men and steal for fucking them. Good, your aid will not be forgotten, and there might be more north in the girl's bones than he'd given her credit for. You've read your uncle's message to you. Do you believe the prize he speaks of is my brother Rickon? Umber crossed his arms. Mayhaps, but hard to tell. Mowers never was much good at words or hiding his meaning. I remember him from when I was a child. Her lips curled ever so slightly. He certainly was memorable. She fell serious. We can only hope. He considered the girl. The South was full of ambitions. You won't be Lady of Winterfell if your brother lives. He's my brother. Her voice was sharp, daring him to question her. He did anyway. You're Stark in Winterfell with him, not there. I would rather my family than power. If looks could kill, he'd be dead. The great white wolf that silently been sleeping by the fire looked at him, its lips pulling up, showing its teeth. Greaton held up his hands in surrender. He'd rather not lose more fingers. Suppose it's not an important worry for now. Indeed, Rickon is 1 in 10 if he still lives. Sansa didn't soften so much as the danger from her seemed to pass. He considered it. The girl might make a proper regent till Ned's youngest was old enough to be lord in his own right. So what's with this news of you sending golden men to Essos? The long night is coming. We'll require food, Lord Umber. More food than is left in all of the north, after the bloody summer we've survived. Any trade with the south, for it will place us in chains. Sansa hadn't flinched from him once, and he wasn't a small or calm man. You'd do well to follow my example if you mean for your family and those dependent on you to survive what is coming. Her words were wise, and he'd rather starve than beg the southern cunts for aid. You've got the right of it. I was raised to be a queen. She lifted her cloak, pulling it over her shoulders. Being a lady of a house Paramount is not so different. Greyton frowned. You mean to bend the knee to that Lannister boy? His voice was dark at the thought of that humiliation. She was unreadable as she stood there, prepared to leave the room, likely to see to the repairs of her ancestral home. For the north and for my family there is nothing I would not do, Lord Umber. And we cannot fight 6 realms of men in the long night, one war at a time. You're that certain your Jon Snow speaks true. Greyjon remembered the letter from the Night's Watch that Robb Stark had received. The increase in wildling attacks, and he was a northerner and of the blood of the first men. He believed her despite himself. Gods damn it. Sansa's chin tipped slightly upwards. Jon Stark and I do. I still think you should chuck that witch out into the snow on her arse, he grumbled, and he still meant to see if the girl would follow her words with actions. Speaking like a northern, a fancy one trained in the south, but a northerner all the same was one thing, but her actions would show the truth of her mettle. Daisy frowned as she saw the motley collection of men come through the gates. 3 of the boys who'd gone out with Brienne hadn't returned, and one of them on the horse looked bad. She dropped down from where she'd been on the wall, cushioning her landing slightly. Straightening, she walked towards them. Brienne, did you already call Wolken? She reached the wheezing and 2 pale guy who was barely keeping in the saddle. She ignored the 8 men who were tied in a row. Holiness. Brienne looked down at her from where she was sitting in the saddle. Podrick is fetching him now. Good. Daisy looked up at the guy. He couldn't be more than 20 at the oldest. Hey, let's get you off this horse, all right? The guy swayed, but managed to speak even if it was more of a pained murmur than proper speech. I'm fine, Your Holiness.
I'm sure you are.
Why don't you come off that horse and show me? Daisy smiled tightly. Tough guy act, but he was definitely hurt. He gave a weak nod and made a movement as if to swing his leg over the horse. It ended up being more of a jerk and he just came sliding down with a pained cry. Daisy caught him, slinging his arm over her shoulder. She hooked her arm around his waist and braced him. You ready to walk to that bale of hay right over there? You can sit down, have some water, and wait for the maester to come see you. Sorry. But he did nod against her. She smiled and helped towards the bale of hay. Or more half carried him, but his feet were still on the ground, so his pride was probably not utterly ruined. Daisy helped him down and held out her hand for water. She accepted a wineskin from someone who clearly had gotten the message. Ignoring the sounds of the prisoners being clapped in proper chains and Brienne barking orders, she pressed the skin to his lips. Come on, drink up, soldier. He did as instructed, and she was able to hold it up, only a small amount dribbling down his chin. So, you have a name there? Daisy asked while carefully lifting his cloak. She had to hide her blanch at the bloody bandages and smell of infection that hit her nose. Readjusting his cloak to hide the damage, she looked up at him as if nothing was wrong. The man's eyelids were heavy, but he replied anyway. Ribbon. He started to fall forward. Daisy caught him. She maneuvered herself beside him on the hay, letting his weight lean on her. That's a good name, Ribbon. Just doing mad duty. His voice slurred slightly as he didn't even try to fight, letting her hold him up. Daisy looked up at Brienne and saw the other woman's understanding. They shared a tight look. Reborn would be lucky to last the night. In the Zephyr, he'd have made it. But not in the Dark Ages, without antibiotics or modern medicine. Even in her world, an injury like this, in the field, could easily kill a man before Evac arrived. And you did it well, Daisy assured the dying man. There was a sound of movement as Sansa and Maester Wolkan, as well as some of the guards, came rushing out to see what had happened. Daisy didn't need to say anything for Wolkan to spot his patient and come at the fastest jog his robes allowed him to move at. I've got to report to Lady Stark. Brienne spoke. Daisy looked up at the knight. I've got this. My thanks. Brienne gave her a slight nod of the head, before moving to speak with Sansa. Daisy didn't need to hear to know what Brienne would say. At least in the broad strokes, they'd found the bandits. The fight had not gone badly. They'd been successful, though the sort of successful that didn't feel that way. She could learn the particulars later. Reborn would need someone to carry him. Once Wolkan had ensured it was safe to do so. What's his injury? Wolkan demanded, as he reached them. She opened the cloak, showing the soaked bandages. I don't know the particulars. Wolkan's face paled. Right, can you carry him to my quarters? I've got him. Daisy didn't bother with pretending the man could walk himself. Instead, she scooped him up with an arm under his legs, and an arm under his shoulders. Whether it was serum or adrenaline, she didn't care. Only that it was easy. The walk to the room set aside for the grievously injured or ill hadn't felt long. As soon as they reached the room, Daisy helped rid Reborn of his clothing, hiding the injury. His cloak and shirt easily hit the ground with a concerning weight and heavy splat from how much blood they must have absorbed. Wolkan sat on the other side of the bed and carefully began to pull the bandages aside. He and Daisy both blanched as they saw the injury. They'd gutted him. The arm Reborn hadn't been using looked like a dog had used it as a chew toy. It was torn, a dirty tourniquet, the only thing keeping him from bleeding out. Wolkan cleared his throat. I'll see about some hot water, and we'll clean this up, lad. Maybe get some milk of the poppy into you. It's not bad. Reborn wheezed slightly as he said it, his injuries oozing blood and some pus as he moved weakly. Said I was fine. Daisy caught his hand. Well, you'll just have to deal with me staying with you till the maester here is done with you. Who'd hold my hand if I didn't? Daisy entered Sansa's study, or solar, or office, or whatever it was. What's going to happen to the prisoners? They'll be executed. Sansa was pale, but didn't flinch from her. I offered them life on the wall. Instead, they've done this. She looked at her. The injured man, she swallowed. Reborn? He's asleep now. Brienne's with him. But he won't wake up. Daisy moved to the chair by the fire and bonelessly dropped into it. I'm going back. Sansa nodded. It means a great deal to the men that you care. I can't heal. Daisy looked at her hands in disgust. It's not my power. She didn't want to talk about her uselessness. So how do you execute people here? Sansa spoke slowly. Beheading is a merciful death, usually reserved for those of the nobility. My father never hung a man though, regardless of crime or rank. She sounded stressed. Whoever passes the sentence should swing the sword, but I can't swing a sword. I heard enough from Brienne. Those men don't deserve mercy. Daisy looked away from her hands to the other woman. I believe you'd be safe to hang them. Sansa made an odd sound. My brother hung traitors in the Night's Watch. I could do the same. Any other news? Daisy asked. She didn't intend to stay long. Sansa shook her head. No, a few ravens, but nothing of importance. Right, I'll be in the maester's quarters tonight then. Daisy brushed some of her stray hairs behind one ear. I'm sorry you have to make this call. The woman, who was running far too much in far too uncertain circumstances, didn't waver. I'm not, it's my responsibility. It doesn't have to be, Daisy pointed out, without judgment. Sansa shook her head. No, it does. It's the way of the North, my people, and I won't abandon them. Her mouth tightened. Lord Umber won't be the only lord who'd scoff and leave if I failed in this. All right. Daisy didn't like the brutality of this world, but she understood it, and there was no doubt the men who would die in the morning were guilty. The offer to punch Lord Umber in the face is still open if you change your mind. Daisy found she was remarkably unbothered by the execution she was attending. The knight holding the dying Rebin's hand killed any doubts about the justice of these executions. Not that she would have protested. It was how justice was given in this world, and she had worked in the shadows for far too long to have not been forced into a position of making a call. The world was better with some people put down before they could do more damage. Murdering, raping psychopaths certainly qualified. She kept an eye on Fitz. He was twitchy, though he hadn't said anything about the practice of execution. Not that he had room to judge, but he hadn't adjusted to the new rules they were surrounded by here. Under the cold sunlight he looked unhealthily pale. Clearly he would need to be dragged out of his lab for some sunlight. Space hadn't been good for his complexion, or nerves. It likely didn't help that the courtyard was dead silent. It said something about these people, their culture, that the crowd that had gathered was utterly silent as they stood around the gallows, which she hadn't realized the wooden scaffolding along the wall had been gallows, but it was all 8 of the prisoners were standing over the wooden drop floor, nooses around their necks, hands tied behind their backs. Daisy noted Lord Umber and Manderley. The fat mermaid, Lord, looked serious, though there was a solemn acceptance and pride almost to him. His vibrations were settled. Lord Umber, on the other hand, seemed almost anxious. He clearly had something on his mind. No, not anxious. She decided anticipatory. Finally, there was Sansa, who couldn't have been mistaken as anything but a great lady, or rather, what Daisy had always imagined an indomitable queen would look like. She wasn't a stranger to masks. For God's sake, her sow was Melinda May. Sansa was similar. There was an air about her she projected that couldn't be missed. She'd have made a terrifying general or senator in Daisy's world. There was some signal, or perhaps Sansa had simply waited a requisite few minutes before beginning. Sansa stepped forward. Her voice wasn't raised, but carried through the silent courtyard. You've been found guilty of theft, murder, running from the Night's Watch, and declaring for a traitor house. If you have any final words, now is the time for them. She looked up at the first man in the row. He spat at the ground. Better to live a little than listen to Ramsay's whore. Sansa didn't flinch, just moving to the next man. And Daisy's fist tightened as she stayed still. But the men's last words were of the same vein. They used their final words to attack the woman before them. It was foul, and yet it caused not a crack or waver in Sansa as she continued. As Sansa finally reached the end of the line, she held out her hand. Her temporary master of arms held out a serrated knife. Her gloved fingers curled around the handle. The long rope was tight, unsuited or trained in using a knife. Sansa may be, but a sharp saw-like knife against an old taunt rope took 3 sharp motions before snapping, and the courtyard was silent as the men died. And Sansa didn't look away. Not once. Finally, as the last jerks of the dead ceased, she spoke. Burn the bodies. And then she turned and swept out of the courtyard, the crowd easily and automatically parting for her. Daisy frowned slightly as she saw Lord Umber's face. He was pleased. Her eyes narrowed, but now wasn't the time. She turned to Fitz. Come on, let's see if I can help with bending the wires. Fitz swore as he stabbed his finger with the end of one of his wires. Shit. He shoved his bleeding finger into his mouth. He threw the spool of wire against the wall, jumping to his feet. I can't work with this. Hey, Daisy grabbed the spool of rough, shitty wire and set it back on the table. Maybe take a breather for a minute. We have time to fix this. He ran his non-bleeding hand through his hair, his other hand falling on his hip. We don't have that much tea. And even if we build this powering, it will be a nightmare. Let alone an intergalactic beacon. One step at a time. Daisy picked up the pair of mangled pliers. Maybe get the blacksmith to fix these first. Fitz glared, but grabbed them from her all the same. He turned, bracing himself on the work table. It was too much. It was like banging his head against a wall. Bad tools, bad supplies, raw resources only. No qualified help, and Gemma millions of stars away. He closed his eyes. Daisy's hand hovered, as if she'd meant to lay her hand over his, but couldn't bring herself to touch him. You've got me. We'll get through this together. We haven't failed yet. She had a sort of bemused yet tired humor in her voice. It needled something in him. He spun, batting her hand away.
Like it's
So hard for you, he snapped. You sure'd like being stuck here? Get to just keep or running away from your problems. Coulson's dead. That won't change no matter how far you go. Saving me won't bring him back. Fitz. Her voice held a warning, but her face said his words had struck, and it fueled some part of him that was sick and tired of fighting and always losing, of it never being enough. So he kept talking. You're not even useful. Your powers bring nothing but death. At least Lincoln would have been able to help if he was here. There was a ringing silence. Fitz's eyes widened as he realized what he'd just said. He opened his mouth. Did to Daisy. I didn't. No, her hand raised. He took a step back, reading the threat instinctively. Daisy, that though wasn't. The air was driven from his lungs in a wheeze, as he hit the wall. Don't you dare. Daisy looked angry, but he knew her enough to see pain. She turned on her heel, her powers not dropping him till she was well out of the workshop. He hit the ground, sucking in air, one hand hitting the stone floor, his other grabbing his throat. Fitz barely had his breath back before he was scrambling to his feet. He had to go after her. Had to fix what he'd just done. He stopped as Snow, his assistant, bared his path. Furious look on his face. Fitz frowned. Out of tea the way. I don't rightly know what that was. Snow's frown deepened, but I know it wasn't right. I won't let you hurt her. Fitz glared. He didn't have time for this. I know that. Now get out of my way, so I can go apologize, or I'll mow you. Snow stared at him, but nodded, and stepped to the side. I'm coming with you, rat. Fitz shoved past and took off at a run. She had a head start and knew the castle better than he did. Frowning, he spotted the side door. She'd go somewhere isolated and enclosed. He took off for the door, sprinting down the hallways. He took every turn that seemed the least habited. Shit. If she found a place to hide, it could be hours before he found her and he'd fucked up. As he moved, he paused at an intersection. On one hand, a lighted hallway where people definitely were. But down the other hall, he could hear cheerful voices. By the smell, a full kitchen. Right, she'd risk the noble idiots over the servants. The servants liked her and would be more likely to try and talk to her. He took another turn into the more well-lit hallways, only to spot her back. Fitz cursed under his breath as he realized what Daisy was intending to walk through. But bloody hell, he slowed to a quick walk. As long as none of the fancy nobles tried to talk to Daisy, it'd be fine. He'd catch up to her and just explain somehow. Apologize and just fix things. He kept his eyes down, avoiding eye contact. Lady Stark, her more senior noble sorts following behind her, as well as a few knight types. It should have been fine, except then it wasn't. The great big giant of a man, as big as Mac only with a great beard and fur cloak, reached out and grabbed Daisy by the bicep. You owe Lady Stark more than a nod, ya fucking forgin' witch. Let me go. Daisy's face set in a way Fitz recognized. She'd been pushed too far and the man in front of her was apparently someone she already didn't like. Fitz saw the others all looking horrified. Lady Stark clearly meant to prevent what was about to happen. But he knew the moment the man didn't let go, what was about to happen. He threw his arm out, preventing the woman from stepping any closer to the man who was about to be thrown into a wall, likely very, very hard. The giant of a man sneered. Why should I? You're just some jumped-up whore who's going to get us all killed. Fuck! Fitz took a half-step backwards. His breathed word came out in a puff of frozen air. He shivered. The temperature of the hall dropping from slightly below a comfortable room temperature to well below freezing. Daisy's eyes narrowed, and the man went flying into the wall with an audible crack. His feet lifted clear from the ground, one hand raised, her vibrations keeping him pressed against the stone. You shouldn't have done that, Lord Umber. Her voice was sharp. And that wasn't good. She wasn't going to be nice. You should be grateful that Lady Stark wants you alive, though why she cares about a stupid, arrogant, self-important asshole like you, I don't know. Her head tilted slightly to the side. I may not be one of your old gods, but they brought me here. I have fought gods and devils, saved worlds, and condemned them. You think petty insults will make me grovel, beg for your approval? The hall was utterly silent, and Fitz cringed. He knew this was going to go bad. Oh, those titles they'd made up for a laugh were about to be a really terrible idea, 'cause he'd seen Daisy lose her temper before. She talked big when she wanted people to back off. Daisy didn't pause for long, her shoulders falling back. My name is Daisy Johnson, the inhuman known as Quake. I am the child of monsters and blood. I am the warrior daughter of the first elder of Afterlife. I am the destroyer of worlds, and I am tired of people like you. Her face hardened, eyes narrowing. The ground shook, ice forming along the walls. Spiderweb-like cracks began to spread across the stones beneath her feet. The apparent Lord Umber cried out, his arm making an awful snapping sound. Fitz realized she was losing her control. Daisy, stop! Her head snapped towards him. He could see it in her face, as she realized she'd crossed the line. And then her hand dropped, facing the ground, and she vanished down the hall in a burst of power. Fitz's hands dropped to his knees. Well, that hadn't gone well. So making up dumb titles and shit for Daisy over engine plans had apparently not been a good idea. He probably shouldn't have helped with that. Straightening, he nodded. Right? He needed to do something. Escort Lord Umber to Maester Welcome and remain with him till I inform you otherwise. Lady Sansa's voice ordered into the silence. She looked at him then, and Fitz realized he wasn't going to be going anywhere. Explain. Fitz's fingers twisted as he stood before the very pale and clearly shocked northerners. Look, if you just let me go after her, she's not going to murder you all. Snow's stupid talkative assistant that he was, burst out. He angered her first by saying he wished someone named Lincoln was here instead of Her Holiness. Who is Lincoln? Sansa asked. She clearly wasn't impressed by Snow's interjection. He winced. You have to understand it. You know, I just understand it. Fitz ran a hand through his hair. How to explain this to these people? They were in love. You don't have a word for it. Lovers, I guess, but he took her place and died. I shouldn't have brought him up, or says to. I mean, Coulson was... Fitz's throat felt tight. It didn't feel real that he was dead. Look, it doesn't matter. I just need to know where a small enclosed space without a lot of people is. One that Daisy would know of. Fitz glanced at the storage room door and carefully opened the door. He winced and stepped in, closing the door behind him, shuffling over and carefully stepping over bags of what he was fairly sure was grain. He made it to the corner Daisy was sitting in, or rather was curled upright on a bag of grain, and he dropped down next to her. There better not be rats in here, he grumbled half-heartedly. What do you want, Fitz? Daisy's arms didn't drop from where they were wrapped around her legs. Her voice rough. He leaned against the stone. It was surprisingly not cold, which the piping through the walls was fascinating here. Fitz shook off that line of thought. I'm sorry for what I said. He gave himself some time to put his words together. It's frustrating. I don't want to be here. Gemma is out there, and I can't get to her. His hand ran through his hair. And you just seem fine. This looks fine to you. Daisy stared at him in disbelief. Fitz huffed. Well, clearly I can be an idiot. Yeah, only sometimes. It's not a good look on you. Daisy sniffed and wiped angrily at her eyes. He pulled a handkerchief out of one of his pockets and passed it over. It wasn't your fault he died, and he was a good guy. But electric powers, or no. You've done a lot. He couldn't have. I don't know why. I said what I did. I just was angry. Daisy blew her nose before crumpling the handkerchief's fabric in her fist. What's the point of this? You're right, though. I can't fix this. I can't get us home. I can't solve all their problems for them. That kid who died last night, he was 16. They think I'm a god, and I can't help them, Fitz. They have an army of zombies coming, and I can't do anything because I'd probably crack their continent if I tried. Well, in a fight against these zombies, I can't think of a person I'd rather have next to me. Fitz reached out and patted her shoulder. He winced and retracted his hand at her barely there twitch at the contact. Right, no touching. When had they stopped hugging each other? What if you stayed with that kid all night, Tip? Didn't you? That would make Daisy's outburst make more sense. She hadn't slept because she'd been holding some kid's hand, and then he just had to go and poke at the Lincoln thing. He frowned, noticing her slightly dark circles under her eyes, the tension in her frame. When was the last time you sat and slept? She opened her mouth. Surely to lie. Properly, he corrected. Daisy huffed, her head hitting the wall behind them. About a week. That's ridiculous. Daisy, Fitz's hand fluttered uselessly. Sep, come on, you need to sleep. Why haven't you been? Daisy shifted uncomfortably. I'm creating a religion. Everything I do could have super terrible consequences down the line. Problems I won't be here to help fix, which I just ruined. Probably all of that, with that little show just now. He was an ass. Definitely deserved it. And he was quite conscious and capable of septing it standing on two very shaky legs after you left. Fitz would have punched the man for what he'd said if he hadn't read the writing on the wall that Daisy was about to deal with it. Daisy groaned. I can't believe I used all those dumb titles. Condemned worlds. Makes me sound like a psychopath. I mean, you said it, not me. Fitz shrugged, with a slight grin. If it makes you feel better, they didn't seem angry about it. He left out the sheer terror. Just best not bring that up. Daisy looked at him. I'm going to have to apologize. And somehow convince my new hippie followers. Human sacrifice is very much not something they should be doing, no matter how scary the destroyer of worlds thing is. Better you than me. Fitz held up his hands at the poisonous look she shot him.